Okay, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for coming out. I just said the last two meetings were via Zoom, so we are back having a couple of in-person meetings. It's nicer to come back together, interact, have a pizza, something of that nature, just to kind of get the same old kind of gets tiresome. So we have to change it up. We will start this evening with our opening prayer. And as always, we use the pastoral plan prayer. Remind everyone we are in the second part, walking with Christ with hearts of kindness and love. So it is on the board there. I'd like to join in. If we can pray together, we'll sign ourselves on the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit. Ever-present God, we always walk in your light and love, surrounded by your care and concern. Our life is a journey with the many choices we make along the way. Grant that we may follow the way of Jesus with eyes of faith and hope, hearts of kindness and love, and minds of justice and peace, always supported by your guidance, your strength, and your safety. May we discover your presence in the people and events we encounter each day, try to proclaim the good news of the gospel by walking and acting justly, walking and loving tenderly, and walking humbly with you. Together we ask this through Jesus Christ, your Son, who walks with us each day. Amen. All saints. Yes. Also do want to wish everyone a happy Easter. I guess it's just 2 weeks ago that we celebrated Easter. So we'll continue that. That's a great event. We kind of bring this to, and I always like so the pastoral plan is what we do, unless Christmas. The pastoral plan almost speaks to the work that we do. You're actually reading the words, it actually sounds like what we do every day, right? So it's such amazing that there's such a connectivity. Even we're going to start now, go to our land acknowledgement. Jen, would you like to?
Out of deep respect for the Indigenous peoples in Canada, we acknowledge that all Toronto Catholic District School Board properties are situated upon traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat peoples. We also acknowledge the land covered by Treaty 13 is held by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and Toronto is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Covenant. We also recognize the contributions and enduring presence of all First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people in Ontario and the rest of Canada.
The next item is a roll call. Apologies. Start. Ward 1, Jennifer.
Here.
Ward 2, Gabriella.
Present.
Ward 3. Here. Ward 5 East is Ravi. Not here. Ward 5 West, Daniel.
Right here.
Ward 6, Gus.
Present.
Ward 7, Lisa.
Here.
Ward 8 East, Rochelle.
Here.
Ward 9, Abe sends his regrets. Ward 10, Brian. Here. Ward 11, North. James. Here. Ward 11, South. Here. Our secondary pair members, Lisa has said regrets this evening to Central. From East, Alicia. From our community members, Natalia,
Present.
trustees, trustee Lepretti, board. We have our superintendent Pearson here. Engagement coordinator, Melissa Ferrer. Our communications person, Marco Fuji, has sent regrets as well this evening. Now, tonight we want to welcome around the table Superintendent Akamo. I don't know if you'd like to introduce.
Gladly. Good evening, everyone. With me, I have from our Religion and Family Life Resource Department, Audrey Fair, who represents areas, support areas 1 and 2, and Veronica Tuzzi, who supports areas 7 and 8.
And as well, to my left here, CFO. Thanks for gracing us again this evening. Thank you. Item 4 is the approval of the agenda. Hope everyone has had, I know I had sent this out initially. And then you first,
Just, I think,
is the same thing.
what do you have there?
If we can move item 7D to before 7C.
Fully alive consultation.
Yes.
Go ahead with the bullying prevention.
Please.
Same thing, okay. Are there any questions with regards to the agenda? So looking for a mover to move the agenda with the amendment at 7D. Go ahead of 7C. Jen? Seconder, Natalia? Anyone opposed? Okay, so the agenda is approved. Okay, are there any declarations of interest this evening with regards to our agenda items? Any declarations of interest? For the time.
Sorry, I just had a question. With the bullying prevention, I think we have to give our answer as a group or as a committee by April 28th on 7C. Now 7D.
It's still 7C, just, okay, yeah, but that'll, when Superintendent Kakamo goes into, he'll go into those details.
Because this is a committee, because today's like April 17th, so I guess we'd have to give our committee answer together today, correct?
So when we get to that item on the agenda, Rochelle, we can speak to that.
Okay.
Right, because we're on item 5, declarations of interest.
Okay,
We'll just deal with them in order. Okay,
okay, sounds good.
thank you. So, third call, declarations of interest. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 6 is approval and signing of the minutes held January 16, 2023. So the minutes, it should read March 6th, 2023. Okay. Need to proofread my checks. So if we have, I know the minutes were sent earlier today. I hope everyone had a chance to peruse them. Are there any, I know we had a few things happen last meeting in terms of votes, motions. Are there any questions with regards to the March 6th meeting minutes?
Oh, no, the minutes themselves, no.
Minutes themselves?
Nope.
Okay, can I get someone then to move receipt? Actually, well done.
Oh, no, right, sorry.
Is another typo?
No, no, it's okay.
I'm only allowed one per meeting. I heard Bob. Remember, everyone, please check the spelling of your name. Okay. I have a tendency to spell your names wrong. Someone to move receipt of our minutes. Anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none, so those minutes are received. So moving into item 7. So 7A is the chair report. I'm not able to pull it up on the screen, but we all have it in front of us. So since our last meeting, that was March the 6th of the 2023, reminder that we had a March break in that meeting, this one, and Easter break, so more days of rest, fewer days of work. So I continue my communication with both the director designate and the parent engagement coordinator. The three of us actually meet 2 weeks prior to our upcoming meeting to discuss any items, anything that's coming up. We usually keep in touch with Superintendent Pearson because he's keeping in touch with other staff from around the board in terms of presentations and whatnot as that are coming to our agenda. Continue communicating with our executive members, first 2 items and things that are going on. I sent out 2 communications during this time. One was with regards to our community engagement policy and get CSPCs to be more, use their voice and to kind of complete that survey and to remind them how important their voice is on all board matters. It's not just CSPCs, not just local, it's also board. And also the communication that we sent out to TCDSP parents with regards to the OAPSI conference that we put out there as well. So just to say thank you to our principals for using School Messenger and getting those communications out. I attended the OAPSI Toronto meeting on March 21st. I'm on social media only as a CPIC person and tweet and engage when it's necessary. I review and watch board meetings and agendas. Some good meetings actually this past couple of weeks. I'm lucky to have Trustee Lepretti always give me discuss items. There's a couple more meetings. No meetings this week, next week. So back in action for those. And again, in reading, I always help out. You don't necessarily have to watch the board meeting. They do take up time. So not everyone has opportunity, but the agendas are always out there before and after, and they're even before meetings. So there's opportunity for parents when you're reading these reports to see what is actually going on, right? The reports that come from staff are very well written, there's good detail, and it kind of at that point can connect you to what you see going on. I prepared our March draft minutes and I prepared the April agenda. Are there any questions? I get someone then to receive. Oh, yeah. And Gabriella? Anyone opposed to the chair's report? Okay, Seeing none, that carries. Thank you. 7B is our treasurer report. I'll turn over to Gus.
Thank you. Chair. Our balance from last month to this month remains the same because our last meeting was in person, so we didn't incur any expenses such as food or mileage. So simply our balance as of today is $89,961.10.
Are there any questions with regards to the treasurer report? Again, that's in the print in front of you. I'm still having technical difficulties pulling it up.
The mileage, is everyone paid up now on the committee?
But once you've submitted,
Because has everyone submitted it now? Because I remember the last meeting,
once you've submitted, they should have gotten their reimbursement checks.
yeah,
The ones who haven't, they can still submit.
well, they can still submit. Okay. There's
We're,
no deadline on that, right?
well, there is.
There is and there isn't.
Yeah, there, within the term of the secret term is we ask. And again, we do remind our members whenever to submit for mileage. Again, it's an option, right? It's not mandatory. And some people may choose not to. And again, it's something that within the structure, operational structure of CPIC, we're able to offer to our members as kind of something for the work that you're doing. Right? Anytime you're doing CPIC business, we can offer this reimbursement of mileage. That's all.
Mileage is from what month to what month again? What's the calendar year for the mileage?
So our calendar, like our term for CPIC goes from November to September. Right? So you'll put,
In the future, then we have to claim it in October. So like today we're in April. So what happens to May, June, July, August? We just wait until the year ends in November and then claim the future months?
so both myself and Gus usually send out reminders.
Yeah.
This year is different from past years. The last 2 years, obviously, were virtual. There was no mileage. Previous to that, all our meetings were in person. So there was more of a structure to our mileage expense. This year being that we're doing in-person, virtual, we're letting the year run. We will send out reminders. In most cases, we may not send it after the meeting. The next 2 meetings are in person, for instance. And our September one is virtual. And that's where I'll cut off. So over the next past 2, if you want to submit a mileage reimbursement, that's at that point, we'll kind of push the envelope to get our members to get it in. Now, if summer comes and September rolls around and it's something that you haven't done or you choose not to do, again, it's up to you. This is an option, something that we're offering. And we roll into the next year, then at that point, yes, we can't go that far back. And again, we may going into the following secret term for 2023, 2024, that rule may be adjusted in order just to maintain some structure. But again, going into this year, we're a very different structure of meetings. We're kind of keeping an eye on it, seeing how many we get in. Again, this is even going to be part of our, when we review that policy. We want to see how much we're paying out on mileage, how much we're spending on food, how much we spend on printing. So that's why, as members, if this is an expense that we're reimbursing, we encourage you to put those. Okay, thanks, Michelle. Someone to move the financial report. Okay. Seconder Natalia. Anyone opposed? Okay, none, so that carries. Okay, so 7C, so we're gonna go to 7D, which is the Institute for Catholic Education Fully Alive consultation. I'm gonna pull up again, this was included in the overall agenda. I'm gonna put the So if, I guess, you guys let me know when you want me to move ahead.
Sounds good.
Perfect.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Kakamo. I'm Superintendent of Nurturing Our Catholic Community, as well as a few other things. With me, I have this evening Audrey Fair, who's one of our Religion and Family Life Resource teachers, and Veronica Tuzzi, also one of our Religion and Family Life Resource teachers. We have been asked by ICE, the Institute for Catholic Education, not just our board, but all Catholic boards in Ontario, have been asked by ICE to deliver a level of consultation with some of its groups, some of the parent groups and student groups across the province of Ontario. And ICE has provided a presentation slide deck for us to use in this consultation. We will work through the consultation slide decks, and towards the end there are a series of questions that ICE hopes that we could ponder and receive feedback from the CPIC. And we have Veronica here who will take notes for us, and so that we can submit those notes and that feedback to the Institute for Catholic Education. So I will proceed and begin with the next slide, please. So Fully Alive is currently the only approved resource by the Bishops of Ontario to meet the family life curriculum in Catholic schools. This program has been in use for decades and has been updated from time to time. Last update was over 15 years ago. And it is indeed an older program and it's time for renewal, and that is a good news story. So it is a currently approved resource by the Bishops of Ontario and by ICE. Teachers know that this is a resource that is utilized to help deliver the family life curriculum, which is family life curriculum, not just for Toronto Catholic District School Board, a curriculum for all of our Ontario Catholic school boards, all of our Catholic school boards. And teachers can use professional judgment and discretion in how the resource is utilized and what other resources are utilized in the classroom to support the family life curriculum or other curriculum material. Okay, next slide, please. So Fully Alive is still fully alive and it's still fully available. Schools have all the resources they need to continue using Fully Alive. Teachers do have access to their books as well as the online files for the program. These will remain available and in place until a new program is ready. You may have heard that Pearson, the publisher, has discontinued its support of the program or its provision of the program, both digital and hard copy. However, the digital program is available through TCDSB as well as through ICE, and teachers have access to these teacher manuals and the student books in their schools and in their classrooms. Next slide, please. With respect to the religious education program, nothing has currently changed. Their students will still be using the Growing in Faith, Growing in Christ program for their religious education. The books, the program, and the website all remain the same. Next slide, please. So as we're looking at renewing the Fully Alive program, we're trying to capture the hopes of the community regarding family life education. And a lot of us will recognize there are many reasons why the Fully Alive resource is indeed ready for a refresh, a renew. It is very dated, pedagogically dated with respect to the representation that is or is not present in the resource. Not everyone who is part of our classroom communities necessarily sees themselves in the resource or represented in the resource. Next slide, please. With respect to expectations in education, as you know, all subject areas have listed expectations of what students will learn. It's how we know what we teach and how we track student growth. For example, in grade 3 math, we may expect students to learn to multiply 2-digit numbers by 2-digit numbers. In grade 7 French, we may expect students to learn to conjugate some irregular verb, such as avoir and être. And so it goes for every subject, for every grade. And such is the case for the family life curriculum. Expectations give us both the overall picture and the specifics of what students are meant to learn, so we know what teachers are meant to teach. Next slide, please. An example from religious education for students in grade 2, an overall expectation might be a student will understand that through the celebration of Mass, we offer thanksgiving and praise to God the Father as a community of disciples who believe in and follow Jesus. That is an overall expectation. More specifically, you'll see specific expectations, which give some detail for the overall idea above. Identify the various ways we express our thanksgiving to God through our participation in the Mass. That is, symbols, songs, words, ritual actions. So the specific expectations speak to greater detail, reflecting the overall expectation. Next slide, please. So what is a hope expectation, which is the focus of this consultation? Hope expectations are different from an overall or specific expectation. Overall and specific expectations aim at the head, mind. What can we know? Hope expectations aim at the heart and soul. How should we live? What is God calling me, us, to? The only subject that has hope expectations is our religious education. Next slide, please. Here's an example of a hope expectation in religious education. We hope that students will cherish the sacramental life of the church as the gift of God's presence in our lives to nourish, restore, guide, and form us as children of God. That is an example of a hope expectation in religious education. Our hopes expressed. Next slide, please. You will often see the hope expectations use words such as cherish or appreciate, or grow in appreciation, or come to know. They sound different than the regular overall and specific expectations. Next slide, please. Hope expectations are not part of a student's report card. These expectations speak about our deep desires for our children. They are not something we can assess or test students on or give a mark for. Unlike checking whether a student knows the parts of the Mass or some of the symbols in a church, a hope expectation speaks to something deeper, something which may only be realized over a lifetime of a person's faith journey. Next slide, please. Let us consider what our hopes in family life education would be. The following text gives you a sense of how we are approaching our hopes in family life education at this time. Here are some of the ideas we're working with. Next slide, please. Our hopes in family life in 4 parts. What family life education is about for us, where it is grounded. What family life education is building on. The work of family life education inspired by the Holy Spirit. Family life education and its orientation towards formation of identity and vocation. Next slide, please. So family life education strives to deepen the awareness and appreciation that human dignity is grounded in being created in the image and likeness of God. The seeds of family life education, in cooperation with all other learning in a Catholic school, contribute to the growth and understanding by students that they are each a unique creation whose identity is rooted in love and created for relationships. In discovering and developing a healthy notion of body, mind, and spirit through the gifts of prayer, sacraments, and family, and by way of developing conscience, the student comes an awareness of being a whole person and a member of the body of Christ. Next slide, please. Family life education strives to deepen the awareness and appreciation that human dignity is grounded in being created in the image and likeness of God. Deepens the awareness and appreciation. That just shows the language of hope that we're speaking to. The seeds of family life education in cooperation with all other learning in a Catholic school contribute to the growth and understanding by students that they are each a unique creation whose identity is rooted in love and created in relationships. Some further hope in discovering and developing a healthy notion of body, mind, and spirit. Through the gifts of prayer, sacraments, and family, and by way of a developing conscience, the student comes an awareness of being a whole person and a member of the body of Christ. Next slide, please. Again, we're emphasizing different language here. Deepen the awareness and appreciation, created in the image and likeness of God. A unique creation whose identity is rooted in love and created for relationships. Discovering and developing a healthy notion of body, mind, and spirit. Next slide, please. Prayer, sacraments, and family, whole person and member of the body of Christ. These are being emphasized. Next slide, please. One more. The family life curriculum invites a deeper discovery of what it means to be a caring family member, which is part of our Ontario Catholic School graduate expectations, and inspires a wonder to learn about self, God, others, and the world as part of the experience of family. Next slide, please. Through the movement of the Holy Spirit, we seek out and strive to discover more about our gifts and identity through healthy relationships and service to others. Here we're emphasizing again, Holy Spirit, identity through healthy relationships and service to others. Next slide, please. Hope expectations are rooted in the recognition that God is ever present in the formation of identity, and that through the church, her sacraments, and our families, we are supported and strengthened to discern our vocation. Next slide, please. Our deepest hope is, how would you express your deepest hope for your children? That is our question here today. How would you express your deepest hope for your children in family life education in their Catholic school? Another question we'd like to ponder, is there anything about the current program that you especially like? Anything about Fully Alive that you would want to see in a new program? And those are the three questions that we're going to open conversation about and receive some feedback. It's very informal. Veronica will be taking notes for us. Audrey is here in case you have any specific questions. I'm here to answer those questions as well, but Audrey is a wonderful expert in her field, and so we're happy to have her as well. So we'll circle back to the question of hope, our deepest hope. How would you express your deepest hope for your children and family life education in their Catholic school? But before we get into these questions, if there are any other questions about anything that you'd like to ask, happy to hear them and do our best to respond.
All right.
Yeah, you were mentioning that students no longer see themselves in some of the material in this resource. So why are we still offering up as a resource for this, for teachers to use?
But it is currently the approved resource that the bishops have approved and ICE has approved for use to assist teachers in delivering the family life curriculum. Teachers can use discretion how to use the resource, which images to share, which images not to share, and the like. And so there is plenty of material and content in the resource and in the document that is quite meaningful and supportive of the family life curriculum. And so we are working with our teachers to help navigate through that discerning of what is best to utilize and what is not.
Well, my concern is the material that can be discriminatory or homophobic to some students, right? So what happens to those students that decide to share that information? Like, are those teachers disciplined? Like, if a parent were to complain and was concerned about this information that's being shared? Because when reviewing like this bullying prevention and policy, it seems like a lot of the things that are happening in this program are things that you're trying to avoid and trying to eliminate. And yet we're still continuing to allow this program to take place.
So the first priority for a teacher in the classroom is to do no harm and to create a safe and caring space in the classroom.
Exactly.
And so building those opportunities in the classroom, building that community, understanding the students and families that teachers are called to serve, and developing spaces where children, regardless of how they identify, regardless of who they are and how they see themselves, are always welcomed and feel that a safe space for them to nurture in their classroom. And that is the first and foremost responsibility of the classroom teacher. So anything that is shared in the classroom should be shared in that light.
No, and I totally agree, right? But when you have this resource available, and even if maybe it's not being taught, but the resources in the classroom and students have the ability to go through it, like what message are you sending to the students that are not being represented in these books and actually are being excluded in the classroom and therefore they don't feel included and feel safe? Like that's my concern.
I hear your concern and I appreciate it very much. And my answer really isn't different. I mean, it's a classroom teacher who knows their students and understands, and even if they don't know their students, needs to be aware that there may be students who identify differently, who discern differently, who come from families that are not necessarily represented in the resource, and needs to work to build that in the classroom. And that's where we as a resource team, we provide that kind of support for our teachers and our principals to provide resources that would assist in making that so.
So any material or any resource that the board has within their libraries or available to students to learn from, if they are discriminatory or in this case, even homophobic, we just keep them in place and we hope that students are not taking those messages, those negative messages, and we're hoping that teachers are making these very clear to their students.
But
That's what it sounds like.
no, it's not a stance of hopefulness. It's a must. It's a moral imperative for our teachers to create and nurture those safe and caring spaces. And so they must do the work to do so. It's not a matter of hopefulness. It's a matter of a moral imperative for them to do so.
So isn't it the easiest fix to eliminate that resource? And find other ways to supplement the expectations?
That could be a solution that some might offer, but because the resource is filled with rich material that supports a healthy family life curriculum, nurtures healthy family life aspects in the classroom community. Again, we're supporting our teachers to ensure that they're creating that safe space where varied worldly perspectives, varied authentic identities are respected, and everyone is treated with respect and dignity as children of God.
Because as a teacher, like as an educator, this would never be allowed in my school board or in my classroom. And I'm wondering, is there anything that the publisher can do where they can eliminate those sections or cover them up? Because I know in previous times, in a resource that needs to be updated, those sections are either eliminated or there's stickers that can be placed over those resources, the textbooks, if you still have them, because of the negative messaging that can come from it.
That's certainly feedback we can give to ICE. I'm happy to offer that feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
No, you said that this resource is approved by the bishops at the
Correct, yes.
archdiocese. So it's in line with the Catholic faith and.
Absolutely. So the resource it represents Catholic teaching, the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It is a resource that teachers could use to help provide Catholic teaching or share what Catholic teaching is in the classroom.
Sorry, how to-
Oh.
I actually didn't get a chance to see these slides. Was it given to us in an email today? Was it today?
This went out, no, actually, this went out last week. It was another attachment. I did send out the agenda. It was
Okay.
included, and then it went out again this morning. So yeah, it was sent out twice.
Okay, I had a question about how this, like, my feedback would be to just make sure that the junior kindergarten and the senior kindergarten kids have like more pictures in the resources. Emphasize the 10 commandments. Like right now, our next presentation will be about the bullying policy. To explain each of the 10 commandments and kind of explain it in more, like for example, Easter, like what's the symbol of Easter? Why did Jesus die on the cross? Like give more definite examples in the resource. And gear it for the kids in such a way that they that they understand it in simple terms. Because right now in today's world, they don't see much emphasis on the Catholic religion. It's just technology, studies, that's it, right? We don't really explain what Jesus Christ is all about. So just gear it towards the younger kids right now because they're the next generation. Focus on the 10 commandments, explain what each of the 10 commandments, and when an action is done in class, explain, okay, for example, you shall not steal. Like what happens when you break these commandments? Like consequences. That's why we're the Catholic board, right? We need to emphasize all of that. Like spend some time in class, at least talking about those resources, because using some, like, we don't also get any ideas of what the children are studying in the class. Like, it would be nice to know what the children are studying, like in terms of this resources. What are they getting? We don't get that information. We don't get any feedback. What did they learn in school today?
Are you referring specifically to kindergarten?
Yeah, kindergarten, yeah, specifically. Because it's hard for children to say, oh, I came home and I studied this if they're at that young age. So if parents get an idea, so then when the child comes home and they talk about something, why did Jesus die on the cross? Then we know, okay, this is what the teacher taught that day, so we can explain it better at home.
So Audrey, will you be able to speak to the kindergarten? I know that there's a resource in development for kindergarten, but what we do currently with Family Life curriculum, whenever the topics and themes are about to be presented to the students, part of the expectations at grade 1s to 8 so far, that communication is sent home to parents outlining what is going to be taught in the next unit for Family Life. So Audrey, did you want to speak to?
Yeah, sure. So as Michael said, grades 1 to 8, there is a letter that outlines the content of what's going to be addressed in the unit. If there are any concerns that parents have regarding that content, they have the opportunity to discuss those concerns with the teacher. And if they don't feel that they're addressed, they also have the option to, especially with, I would say, with theme 3, you know, that's where sometimes parents have concerns. They have the option to take their student out of that class when discussing those topics. With the kindergarten, so just be aware that with the Family Life curriculum, they do try to make the material that's being discussed age appropriate. And if you're concerned with the like if you have a child that's in a particular grade, that document is available for you to see what they will be speaking with. Now, having said that, good practice and pedagogy with a teacher is to communicate with parents. Just generally, you know, what their kids are engaged in, the learning that their kids are engaged in. I know that it's been really challenging, and some teachers haven't been able to do that as readily as some parents would like. But generally speaking, that's the aim in terms of communicating with parents. I think when it comes to really embedding our faith in what's being discussed, it comes down to the hope of healthy relationship and centering the student's faith and identity in God. And I don't say that it sounds like easy, but in the end, that faith piece and that relationship piece and the idea of centering it in God's love is where I think that nurturing piece comes. And when it comes to the nitty gritty, like you were talking about, there might be text in there that could be hurtful or harmful to students. They might feel excluded. As a Catholic school board, there is a commitment to teach what the Catholic spirituality and worldview is. But as Catholics, we are also incumbent to teach in a way that is inclusive and respects the dignity of our students and makes them understand that they are loved no matter what. And then that we are there to accompany and journey with them. And so, yes, the Fully Alive textbook provides that material, which I think there's been a lot of media discussion and recognition that not all the lived realities of our students and families are captured in this book. It needs to be updated. But that's not to say that teachers, especially knowing who their students or their families are, can't create that safe and inclusive space for the sharing or for any other supplementary material that could be used to acknowledge and recognize the lived realities of our students. So that is the approach, and that's the hope for the approach that is being taken when engaging in teaching the family life curriculum.
So can we have that outlined to the JK and the SK as well, since it only starts with grade 1?
So that is something that ICE has been working with. So with the religious ed curriculum as well. So they've been building, right, every year. And so they've finally finished grade 8 during COVID. They've now moved to the kindergarten for the religious education program. And so they're still working on that piece.
And,
But hopefully they'll get to that stage.
and how many minutes in a classroom day is spent on this?
So typically the religious education program is 30 minutes, 4 days a week, and then 30 minutes once a week for family life. That's the recommended, sort of the recommended way to schedule the programming. Not teachers might choose, not every teacher is going to do that. They might choose to do 1 hour of religious ed one day, right? Or they might do a chunk of family life. But generally speaking, the amount of hours that are covered would be the guideline.
And what if they don't meet that guideline for that week?
Then they should make up for it the next week.
So they are required to meet it then?
Well, just like every teacher is required to cover the overall expectations of a program, there's that requirement. Whether a teacher does or not, I mean, I don't know. But that's the hope, that every teacher is meeting that expectation.
So how do we know as parents that it's being met if the outline's been sent only to grade 1s to 8, like, do the parents know at some point that that outline has been met at some point after? Like, is there a check mark? Okay, this was done, this was done. This was discussed in school today.
Yeah, I think that's a communication that would happen if there's a parent that is concerned, based on they see what their child is doing. If there is a concern, they can express it to the parents and have that discussion. To the teacher, the parent with the teachers.
Okay.
I think that's fair.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. So I have 2 more on the speaker list. I guess we're still on our deepest hope. We're still dealing with,
I think we're sort of
kind of going everywhere.
which is
So let's
fine.
see where the next.
Veronica's busy typing away.
Okay,
so-
she's still taking notes. And again, because everyone heard the 3 questions that we are addressing. So hopefully in comments and whatnot, we can touch on that. So Daniel, you're next.
So Michael, what started this process? Was it just because the publisher stopped printing it?
It was, it's been up for refresh and renew for quite some time. And before the work that is going to be involved in actually renewing the Fully Alive resource and whatever iteration ends up coming out from that renew, they're first looking at the family life curriculum itself, because that's what we have to focus on first, is the curriculum expectation. So ICE is its first stop is the family life curriculum to take a look at that and then move on to the Fully Alive resource.
Have you guys been getting pushback from the teachers for teaching it how it's been up until now or something? Because it seems like you're giving the teacher a lot of leeway, which is good. Like they're allowed to teach it as they see fit based on who they have in their class and based on the families that they have. So have any of the teachers been giving you guys pushback or something?
In terms of using the curriculum, with respect to the curriculum, we always receive questions of support through the channels of communication with our resource teachers. I don't believe we received any pushback with the family life curriculum.
Not pushback in terms of direct emails that like the emails that, so I can speak to myself personally, emails that I get are really more questions about, well, more recently, not having access to the Fully Alive PDFs. And anytime I've responded with regards to the Fully Alive PDFs, I've always included the piece around, please recognize the lived realities of your students and your families in teaching it so that it is taught in an inclusive way.
Yeah, which is the right, I think
Yeah,
the right way to do it.
Otherwise, if you're just teaching from the textbook, and it is out, it's like it hasn't been updated in 15 years, then it's not going to be the full depth and breadth of.
you're not, so you guys are,
program.
you're not forcing the teachers to say exactly what is stated in the PDFs or whatever. They can adjust the curriculum as they see fit based on realities of today.
Yes, and I mean, again, it's as a Catholic school board and as part of the family life curriculum expectations, they still have to present the Catholic worldview.
Okay.
But again, it should be done in a context that recognizes, again, like this is respectfully the Catholic worldview. We also recognize that there's a worldview that is a different understanding. And we also have to respect that too. And it's not just about the Ontario Human Rights Code. It's about, again, acknowledging the identities and the realities of the students and their families. And I would even say staff in the school community. I think sometimes, and I'll just say this as a point of privilege, I think sometimes it's hard for people to appreciate the challenges that some of our students, staff, and families struggle with. If you look at the report that was published in the summer in August of 2021, and I don't know if this is going to be addressed in the next presentation around bullying, the amount of, it's a lot of our students who identify as Two-Spirit LGBTQ, they struggle in quite a number of ways because they don't feel safe in their school environment. The language that they hear, the fact that their identities are not acknowledged in the curriculum, having that kind of language or examples makes them feel like more safe. And so I don't may I just to give you an idea of what I don't know if we have time, but just to give you an example, in terms of the report, it says that 62% of 2S LGBTQ respondents in the survey, they feel unsafe at school compared to 11% of students who identify otherwise. That's a large number.
For which report are you reading?
This is the Still in Every Class and Every School report that EGAL did. And they have I don't know if that's something as parents you want to understand better, because I know that we have parents and families, all of us as educators, we have, we're on a different spectrum of understanding Catholic teaching and of, the secular worldview. But I think what is really needed in addressing this and problem solving this together is like authentic and meaningful dialogue that really involves listening to each other, no matter what spectrum of belief we're on, and really centering our students to serve them in the best way that we possibly can in our vocation as an educator, parent, administrator.
Thank you, Audrey. We'd love to hear from the,
So the next question is about parents. What feedback have you been getting from parents? Because we're educators, we're our kids' educators first before you guys, right? So we should have, I would say, the biggest say.
Right.
So what kind of feedback are you getting from parents from the board?
so at the board level, we don't directly hear about concerns from parents that speak to the specific family life curriculum or the fully life curriculum. From time to time, we will hear some questions and some concerns about some of the content. And we do hear from time to time, some parents are choosing to not have their children participate in certain aspects. In the province of Ontario, the government has permitted parents to opt their children out of the teaching of the health and phys ed strand D of the curriculum, which talks about human development and healthy sexuality. In our Ontario Catholic school boards, that is taught, health and phys ed, that aspect of health and phys ed is taught through our family life curriculum. And so this is another important reason why whenever we're teaching various units, we have to communicate with parents ahead of time so they know what is being taught. And so they can make some choices about their children as the first teachers of their children.
So like, to me, like after going through all this, it seems like most of and I agree, the Fully Alive has to be updated 100%. Like, I think it's the same when I was in elementary school. That's how long it's been, but it seems to be external forces that are affecting the board instead of coming from within, from the parents. It seems to be all the voices outside coming in, and we're kind of forgetting about everyone here.
Well, I mean, this is why ICE is engaging in consultation with CPIC, even with CPIC, not just our CPIC, but CPICs across the province. They're engaging in consultation with WAPC across the province. They're engaging in consultation with student groups across the province. And so they want to hear about the hopes of parents, what they'd like to see coming out of a revised or renewed resource that could assist teachers and parents in the family life curriculum.
Will you be giving more weight to certain aspects or certain groups?
Again, so it's not my work. I'm here as a sort of a conduit of receiving information. It's the Institute for Catholic Education and the Bishops of Ontario. That they're consulting with parents, I think is wonderful and it's important. And I think if I was around that table, I'd listen very carefully to what our parents are saying.
Thank you.
Hi there. So first and foremost, just on I did not put my hand up for this, but just based on what you just said, just something as a point to take note on is if the interest is to get the voice of parents, I would invite you to consider going beyond CPIC, because here there are.
Just before it's ICE is
I understand.
bulk.
Yeah, no, but
When you say you mean?
I don't mean you personally. I totally
I
understand.
get it.
You are here, you're the messenger.
Use generic,
Okay,
use generic.
you are like yes, okay, absolutely.
Guy.
And just, and really just because I'm clear that everyone is here to further this conversation to ensure as many voices are included. I really felt what you spoke to. And so, just to say that another opportunity might be to include parent councils, CSPCs directly, if there's that opportunity, as a way. But anyways, that's not what I was gonna say. One of the questions was, how would I express my deepest hope for my children in family life education in their Catholic school? What do I love about the curriculum currently? and then anything that I would like to see in a new program. Full disclosure, I have no idea what the current curriculum actually looks like. So I am speaking to what I believe it says, and perhaps I'm going to say something that's already been adjusted or considered. Having said that, I did watch my child get ready for preparation for communion. And I really appreciated the images, the visuals, the very real conversations that seemed to really get down to the level of where the student is thinking from, to have them integrate with what the learning is. So that would be something that I would assert is also part of the fully alive teaching. So I would say I would really appreciate that. I think that that's being done really, really well. Something I noticed was that there was this point, it stuck out. It was like, when you steal, when you lie, it makes God sad. And I remember thinking, why would we teach our children that it makes God sad? Because then it allows for the child to believe that other people are responsible for their own feelings. And I believe that there's an opportunity here, given the revamping of the Fully Alive program, to really integrate with where the curriculum is leveling up to mental health conversations, to emotional intelligence conversations, to resilience conversations. Really, it's important that we're doing that, and I love it. And I see an opportunity for Fully Alive to integrate itself into that, to then be able to deliver on the family life education. Because the reality is that what I believe is missing, and this is my contribution here, is what are some takeaways that our children are going to be able to get from their Fully Alive teaching that they're going to be taking with them throughout their life, with whatever situation they encounter, whether it's a bully in the schoolyard, or let's face it, a bully at work, or a bully, or not even a bully, someone that is in clear contrast to what they stand for and what they believe in. So the opportunity here that I see is to incorporate into the teaching connected listening, like listening, connectedness, and teaching our children to walk away with tools that they can apply. Perhaps part of it could include, I know we call it mindfulness. I really, to be completely honest, don't know what the Catholic faith calls it, but tools that are usable in the moment in everyday life. Because let's face it, some children at home are in precarious positions. So the education opportunity here is to equip the children with tools to then use in all of the situations that they're faced with, including those at home. So I would say that, and I would say that, again, just to reiterate, the opportunity to integrate resilience, mindfulness, emotional intelligence, and all of those things that really underpin our children's growth and education. And I think that would be a real opportunity. I'll leave it at that, just to give somebody else the opportunity, but that would be my piece. Thank you.
Gabriella. Jennifer?
Everything she said.
Times two.
Too. But I'll go one step further with, this is something that's been a hot topic at the board, is we need to get this information out, not just to CSPCs. It needs to go to all parents. If there's going to be a survey, if there's going to be, what do you think? It has to go out to all parents. The only way that they stay informed, it's the only way that they understand what's being communicated to their children. And it's the only way the board knows what that feedback is going to be. We have 80,000 plus kids in the school board. So if every, there's going to be at least one parent there, some or a guardian in that position, that's 80,000 voices. So I know it takes a little bit more work and maybe a little bit more money, but it's important at the end of the day because our voice counts the most. We're the ones, our children come home to us at the end of the night. And they're the ones who are going to say, Mommy, I learned this at school today. And they're going to have questions and they're going to need answers. And I think parents need to be prepared for all of that. That's what I wanted to communicate. It needs to go out to all parents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Natalia?
Okay, and just to wrap up, bottom line with all I've heard tonight on that piece is this. I sit here representing the Ontario Association of Parents in Catholic Education. And just to reiterate what Jennifer says, you need to go to parents. It is good to come to PIC and it is good to come to OAPSI. But ultimately, you're asking a small segment for every parent's opinion. Not every parent in our board is represented here. And to get the true scope and the true feeling, we need to ask parents. Yes, we're Catholic and we want our kids to be taught through the Catholic lens. But we must agree on what that lens should look like. To be fair, and love, be fair. To be fair, we need to expand it. We need to actually listen. Listen, not just ask for parents, but listen to what they say to us. We would like their opinion on their children, on what we should be teaching them and how we should. To reiterate, we are our children's first teacher, regardless of what role we play in this, regardless of if it's parents, educator, administrator. We're all parents. We're all one family. We're all Catholics. So let's go out, regardless of the timeline. I know we want to wrap this up by June. Maybe we started late if that's the case. But maybe we then expanded and say, you know what? We come back in the fall and we're going to continue on because we didn't get enough. So if we're going to do it, I say do it right. Do it through our parents, but especially do it through our Catholic lens. Thanks.
Thank you, Todd. Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to? Brian?
Yeah, just one more thing. So is the plan moving forward to have the program align more with the health curriculum, like moving forward? It seems like there's like parts that are missing at times, and is it the plan for the program to include the entire health curriculum, especially for the section that you mentioned, like the growth and development sections?
I don't know if that's the plan, but that's certainly feedback that we could provide that parents feel that there should be more of an intersection with the health curriculum.
Because that's where it's being taught, right? You said the health curriculum is being taught in fully.
Not the entire health. So there's a vast health and phys ed curriculum.
Yeah.
Made up of, I believe it's 4 strands.
I'm not as familiar with the HP curriculum, but
The growth and development section.
Yeah, so that's a strand, one strand out of the strand
being
D.
taught Fully alive, right?
That
only some.
some aspects that speak to human development and healthy sexuality.
Okay.
Those aspects are taught through the family life curriculum
The other parts are taught through.
in health and phys ed, class.
And we do, we have been collaborating with different departments. So we have collaborated with Karen Enns, the HPE resource teacher, as well as the equity department, the resource teachers there, to try to work more together in discussing your approach and like building resources and support. So the work is happening. It takes time.
Thank you. Lisa?
I was just gonna say what the hope I'd like to see is, a stronger presentation to fight the world of hate that we have out there with our kids. Because I know it's being exhibited in our schools as well. And I think we have to go a step further in how we're addressing in the teaching of just our faith and what it means in the 21st century and all the messaging and all the information they have access to now at such a young age. I think we have to jump ahead, and by the time you even get this out, who knows what else will exist. But the fact that our young kids have access to so much information online, and just like I said, the hate, the kids don't know how to talk to each other, that loss, that pandemic trauma that we're all experiencing, and how to address it in a way that we can start recreating like that level of love in our schools again, because I think we've lost that.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I'm good, again, I guess, you guys want more, or? If there's any- I know where we are, I'm watching the clock.
Right, I forgot your name.
It's Audrey.
Audrey. What you said before about the dialogue, I just want to say thank you. Because you actually got me, like I was about to like cry. He really got, I was like, oh. But that communication and the listening to each other, no matter where we are, what we believe and this crazy world we live in. But thank you for saying that, because it's important that we all listen to one another and hear what we have to say.
Thank you for addressing that. I think sometimes it's important to go back to the basics, and that's just even like the language that we use. How do we actively listen? So when you're talking about social emotional learning skills. So we have been trying to do that with PD with teachers. So we ran Christian meditation sessions on how they can try to develop some of those skills in the classroom. How do we respond rather than react? To address that, the idea of being open-minded and non-judgmental. And even like kind of looking at, well, how does our own lived experiences shape the biases we might have? So there's work that we have been trying to do in that, in terms of going into schools, doing some inclusion workshops, in terms of sharing some of the resources, even through our pastoral plan. So just wanted to let you know we are trying. I really appreciate this opportunity to hear directly back from parents. And I think it would be amazing if we could get more input from parents. And I don't know, I'm not as familiar with the way CPIC works or OAPC, but even in terms of the leadership with OAPC, I mean, this is something that parents across the province are, they're really interested in and probably would love to have the opportunity to have a voice. And is there any role that OAPC can play collaborating with the Institute for Catholic Education, with whatever respective boards, to perhaps create a space for dialogue, rather than just a one directional, this is what we have to say, but sometimes engaging in that dialogue can really be meaningful, because that's also relationship building. And the process of listening to each other and trying to respond to each other, I think that process is just as important. So maybe that's something that, because it's not just about the school board and ICE, like the OAPC and CPIC, every seat at this table, you're representing different areas in schools, and you also have a leadership capacity, which is beautiful that you're taking your time to do that. And maybe that's something too that you could leverage as part of your leadership role among parents, to collaborate together to create that space for dialogue.
Okay, thank you, Robin. So I'm just keeping an eye on the clock, and this is the tip of our iceberg this evening. If there's nothing else anyone would like to add, I'm gonna say thank you.
Oh, sorry, it's fine. Just so everybody knows, OAPC is doing consultations throughout the province, and Annalisa, the executive director, is currently the president of ICE, sitting as the president of ICE this year. So you can reach out to her as well.
So if there's any, I guess, other questions or concerns, we're fortunate enough that we have Annalisa here around the table. So thank you again.
OAPC is a partner of ICE and very much involved in the consultation processes and in the review process of the programs.
Can I get someone to receive the presentation, Jen? And the seconder. Anyone opposed? Okay, seeing none, that's received. Thank you again. We'll move or keep going long, so back to 7D, 7C. So 7C is our Toronto Catholic District School Board Bullying Prevention and Intervention Policy SS11 consultation. So it's back to Michael.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Audrey and to Veronica for supporting the first part of the evening with the fully alive consultation, family life curriculum consultation. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting unless you really want to, but thank you very much. So on to not only am I NCC superintendent, but also Safe School superintendent. And so switching gears a little bit, not too much, but a little bit, speaking about the bullying prevention and intervention policy, SS11. Some recommendations have been made at the Governance and Policy Committee based on some review of the policy. And so we can move on to the next slide. I'll just give you a bit of the background information. So bullying prevention intervention policy was recently updated to align with changes made to PPM 144, bullying prevention and intervention, issued back in November 25th and November 25th of 2021. It recommended updates also included the addition of procedural guidelines. So you'll see two documents in your agenda package. One is the policy document and one are procedural guidelines. And the policy has also been reviewed through a trauma-informed equity lens and updated to include terms that reflect prohibited grounds of discrimination in Ontario, which really was the main push from PPM 144, bullying prevention intervention. The ministry wanted to ensure that these terms that reflect prohibited grounds of discrimination in Ontario that are to appear in our code of conduct are also appearing in our policies and applications and procedures with respect to bullying. Next slide. So with respect to a consultation process, the Safe Schools Department is currently consulting with various groups to review the recommended changes. These groups have included CPIC, CPIC, OAPSI. We've also are seeking consultation from every one of the parent councils in each of our schools in elementary and secondary. Each group is invited to review the bullying prevention intervention policy bundle that you've received, which includes a version of the SS11 policy, which has the tracked recommended changes. So you'll see the strikeouts and the bolded grays. The strikeouts are pieces that are being either removed or lifted. Most of what is being struck out in the policy is not because it's no longer valid and we want to eliminate it, but we've put it instead in an operational guideline. That's why you see two documents, the bullying policy and the operational guideline. And because in being effective policymakers, we're trying to, staff and governors are trying to create policies that are succinct, but are comprehensive, but succinct, and whatever is more intended to be operational to be represented in an operational guideline. And that's what we've done. So some of the things that have been struck out, or most of the items that have been struck out, you'll see that they've been placed in the procedural guidelines. You'll also see a polished version of the SS11, which means that if all of those recommendations were approved, this is what the document would look like. And of course, again, the newly developed procedural guidelines for the policy. So after reading and reviewing the documents, each group is being asked to complete the survey to provide feedback, much like what we did just a few moments ago with the Fully Alive and Family Life curriculum consultation. The idea from our research department is to receive one response from the group, but you know that all the responses that were shared for Family Life and Fully Alive, not necessarily we're all aligned with one another. Our hope is not to receive consensus necessarily, but to receive feedback and input. And if that feedback and input is varied in and of itself, we're happy to still receive it and consider it. So the purpose is not to reach consensus on aspects of the bullying policy. Member A of the committee might have a certain perspective about an aspect of the policy that differs from member B. We can include both of those in the survey response. Because you'll see that the survey response questions, the questions in the survey are not specific questions. They're very much open-ended questions. There's one or two questions that are open-ended, asking for feedback. Tell us what you think is missing. Tell us what you like. Tell us whatever it is that you think is missing, whatever it is that you think needs to be changed or included or removed. We're happy to receive it all. So I'm not sure how you want to proceed, Mr. Chair, if you want to take the time now to go through the policy or give people an opportunity to do that on their own and submit responses to a collection point.
I'm gonna open it up for questions.
Okay.
I know I sent out to everyone, just the two, the copy of the policy with the changes and the strikeouts. And then I sent out the guidelines. However, on the Toronto CPIC.ca website, everything is there, so everyone is available to look at and review and I know Lieutenant Cacknell, in the email you sent, it says it takes about 20 minutes to complete the survey. We just saw us spend about 50 minutes on fully live, so I don't know how we're gonna get through, but well, let's start with Jennifer.
So I noticed that a lot, like you said, a lot that has been stricken out has gone into the guideline, the procedural guideline. One of the issues I have with guidelines, and it has happened in the past in other places where guidelines have been developed, sort of like a take it or leave it almost with a guideline. It's not really, it's not built into the policy. So it feels as if, or it seems as if it's not adhered to so often. And the parts that I'm concerned about, especially dealing with the communication back and forth between parents in regards to whether it's the person bullying or the person who's been the victim of bullying, and how communication goes back and forth, or how it's communicated from the principal to parents. It's been put into the guideline. So because the guideline is general, will that happen? Like, is the principal then having to call the parent, regardless of who it is, and say, this happened? Will it happen will the principal do that every time? Or is it sort of like they make a decision on whether they should or shouldn't? I'm just concerned with the guideline because guidelines seem to be more general, kind of, they're not really, in stone, kind of. In the policy, it's just, you have to follow the policy.
That's a fair comment to make, and perhaps the uncertainty comes from the term guideline, where it says, guidelines, do I need to follow it? Do I not need to follow it? And so I'm going to take that back, and perhaps maybe we don't call it procedural guidelines, probably call it protocols, or the case may be. But the expectation is that principals and staff follow these, calling them guidelines for now, but we might call it follow these guidelines as a part of the policy. So the policy is a document that is on the website. Procedural guidelines will also be a public document right next to the policy document on our policy register on the website. So the expectation is that what's in the guideline is adhered to. There will be training and retraining with our administrators, because we've had turnover with new administrators as of late, where they haven't seen these aspects in a guideline and where they've seen it in policy. So our intention is to do that training and retraining and refreshing, and to be explicit about the expectation that these are followed.
Yeah, I think protocol is probably, and then they know, okay, this is what I have to do. Yeah.
This is a suggestion that you guys will take into consideration. Suggestion?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a suggestion that we're going to get a lot of feedback from the various stakeholder groups that we're consulting with. I'm not here to make a decision about any of the feedback tonight, but certainly we are going to receive it for sure. And while I am superintendent of Safe Schools, my voice, my perspective is not the only one that's considered. Yours, of course, is considered, as well as other stakeholder groups that provide some feedback too.
Daniel?
Just a clarification, page 5, about 3/4 of the way down.
Is it the guidelines or the policy?
I don't know, this one,
Policy.
policy.
Pull it up here.
Just a clarification.
Yep.
The highlighted is including but not limited to behaviors that occur off school premises or outside school hours or online. I'm very big on schools not getting involved in kids' lives outside of school. That's the parents' issue. I feel like that's overreach. I understand there are terrible parents out there. There are, but regardless, like who decides what's what's good behavior and bad behavior off school premises or outside of school hours?
Very good question. I'm glad you're asking it. It speaks to impact on school community, on students, members of the school community. So if something occurs after school hours, off school property, that has nothing to do with anyone at school, staff or student, or anything at school in the school community. There isn't that impact, there isn't that intersection, there isn't that, they used to call it nexus. Then you're right, a principal does not have authority over a student who has behaved in a certain way if there's been no impact on the school community. However, if there is an impact, whereas there was a fight in the park down the street after school, and the fight was between two students of the school, and a lot of students observed the fight, that has an impact on school climate and on school community. That is more than likely that's going to come back and affect relationships in the school, in the classroom, at recess. So it's in those kinds of situations where a principal would have authority to act according to code of conduct, the bullying policy, whatever the case may be. As an example. If there's no impact on school, then a principal does not have that authority.
And then, like, I read it over, everything looks great to me, there's really nothing there, but there's nothing here that I could see about, like, there's a lot about safe schools and preventing. What if you can't prevent? What if it gets to a point where there's got to be solutions to the problem?
You want to elaborate what you mean by that?
Like, let's say there's a kid in the school that just, this policy just doesn't get through to him or her.
So,
You know, and the principal's done everything they possibly can, and it's just reached the point, the boiling point where if this is what the principals have to work with, what do they do?
so
You know, because I'm sure it gets to situations where, you know, sometimes it gets past, you know, maybe an assembly isn't enough, or sitting down and talking to them in their office isn't enough, or something like that.
these are all interventions that you've listed that we would like our principals to employ. You know, dialogue, conversation, supports, resources, interventions, assemblies, presentations, restorative practice where we're bringing people together to try and repair their relationships, as opposed to, leaving them to be, leaving them at their own devices. But I think what you might be talking about is the whole notion of progressive discipline. So if you notice on the first page of the policy document that you just referred to, there's a whole host of regulations and policy programs that are listed, and other policies that intersect with this bullying policy. Towards the bottom, for example, is the SS01 suspension and expulsion policy. And there's operational guidelines for that as well, and investigations. So all of those intersect with this. And so when it's appropriate to do so, different levels of progressive discipline may be applied. Always thinking about, the student that we're served, because even the perpetrator or the person causing the harm is one of our children and one of our students. We need to take care of them just as though we would take care of someone who may have been victimized or someone who has received the harm. And so it's important that we provide 360 supports for everyone, and we do our best to move students from misbehavior to self-discipline, self-regulation. We're learning more and more that oftentimes behaviors are cries for help, as opposed to just making bad choices. And so we have to work very carefully to understand the students that we're working with, both those that are receiving the harm and those that are causing the harm. We think about things like mitigating and other factors. things that the student has experienced in their lives, things that may have been challenging for the students, that may have led to certain behaviors, perhaps a lack of interventions, a lack of supports. Maybe a student is frustrated because perhaps their individual education plan needs to be updated and it's not addressed, some social emotional concerns. These are just different things that I'm throwing out there that we all have to consider. But yes, if it's appropriate to do so, progressive discipline at a serious level can also be applied.
And then the last, sorry.
No, go ahead,
The
sorry,
last
Doris.
one is, this is just anecdotally, like from the yard and parents that we talked to. That there's, like what you're describing is, makes sense for the person who, for the child who is causing the bullying and doing stuff like that. But I've talked to parents where the kid who's being bullied isn't getting as much support. Is there something that could be put in here to support the victim of bullying? Because there seems to be a lot to avoid and to guide the child that's having the issue and being the bully, but there isn't as much support after the fact for the kid that was the victim of bullying. That's just like strictly anecdotal, just talking to parents that's around my schools and stuff.
I encourage, and I'm sure you all encourage, in your dialoguing with parents that have that concern, is to encourage parents to continue having the conversations with the teachers and with the principals. If you feel or if parents feel their children are not getting the support that they need, don't stop advocating. Speak to the teacher, speak to the principal. If you're not getting anywhere at that level and you feel more needs to be done to support your child, that next level would be the superintendent. But there are aspects both in policy and protocols that outline this, that absolutely support must be provided to the student that is receiving the harm or is being bullied.
Great, Mr. Chair. Just a quick supplement to that. I think when we're talking budget a little bit later, one of the reasons why we're focusing on protecting our social services disciplines with such vigor is because of not just all students where they're at with their mental health and well-being, but making sure that we have, whether it's child and youth workers, social worker, whatever supports that we can have that are also available to the principal. Special services, that's been, and we've talked a little bit at CPIC about this as well, which is, it's kind of right now, that's the important focus. That's what's bubbling up is the mental health, but then also peripheral supports for students that fall under the types of situations that you've just raised.
It's just like the parents, they sit with the principal and the principal hears them and the principal has their hands full because they have to deal with the issue, with the problem, right? And that makes sense. It makes perfect sense. And it's almost like the victim falls to the wayside. Oh, he's okay. It stopped. They're okay. It's just that sometimes they need a little bit of support too.
Yeah, so those are resources that we attempt to keep not only to the principal, but to Superintendent Kakamo and his team as well. So those are a priority for us financially as well, knowing that those are real issues in our system. Thank you.
Sorry. No, hold on. Natalia.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll start with my last thing first and then go back to my original. To elaborate more on what Dan asked. The trauma of the child who has been bullied. I sit here as a mother who had a child that went to her system and who was bullied. Because we moved from one part of the city to the next, spent 5 years at a school where she was bullied, but she was bullied because of how she looked. She always said to me, Mom, it was the one thing I cannot change about myself. And she went to a part of the city that we thought would have been more inclusive. And it would. For what she went through for those other 5 years, and these are her elementary years I'm speaking of. I often look back at it. My brother-in-law said to me, the first 5 years when she was being bullied in her first elementary school, it's not always about the education. Sometimes it's also about the social. And being one of 5, that's why my hand is up with 5. Being one of 5, when you look back at the photos that looked like her, made her stand out in a target. So to Danielle's point, the trauma that she sustained, that she lived through, still, there is residual. She went to another elementary for 5 years where it should have been better because she saw people that looked like her. Within the first few months, she was pushed down the stairs. To this day, I'm eternally grateful to God that she walks. I remember saying that to the then principal. She could have broken her spine, her head. You know, I think about all the things that could have gone wrong. Did teachers become aware of the people who were doing it? Yes. Did they keep an eye out for the child being bullied out on the playground? Because our kids are smart. Kids are smart. They know it's down the stairs when there's no teacher. They know where to get wherever they want to get, especially the quiet ones. But when a child is bullied and it's obvious and people realize somebody else saw, okay, this is what happened. Principals then say to the teacher, we know that there is a set who takes on a person or a few, look out for those. But I will sit here as a parent and said, yes, I know I had teachers looking out. Yes, I know I had principal that was aware, but no one ever offered my child. And I speak on my behalf. I know I'm not supposed to do that at this table, but no one ever said, what is the side effects of that? What is the long-term effects of that? She stands up now, and she's a great advocate for what it's like to be bullied. She learned a lot because she always said, I went through 10 years of it. Thank God for high school, because by then, and thank God for the church, she went in to do confirmation and decided to become a catechist in the church and decided to teach the little ones. She still to this day do it. Tomorrow she'll be teaching first communion class. But we never ever, to your point, offer resources to the traumatized ones. They're always, you know, I remember a principal once saying at an award I went to for this same child, we never remember the good students. As she walked on stage and he was presenting her with this award that it was the first time in 20 years that somebody had gotten 100% in the subject. We always remember the bad students, he said, as he was giving out this award this night, because they're the ones we spend the most time with at the office. So they're the ones that we remember, the ones that are always constantly with us, not necessarily the good ones we're here celebrating tonight. So whatever we're doing, whatever changes we're making, and to that end, my first point to you was a guideline is just a suggestion. It is not a policy and it's not a bylaw. A policy and a bylaw, it's a law, it's a rule. You have to adhere to it. You don't have to adhere to a guideline. So if we're gonna make it and we want it to be firm and we want to effect a change and we want to make a difference, because I like change maker. You know, I encourage my children, not in just the home or the church, but in the schools also, to go out there and be change makers. So if we as a board want to change it and we say bullying matter, being traumatized matter, and we want to put a stop and we want to be firm about this, then we should not be using the word guideline. We should be saying, these are policies, these are guidelines, these are our rules, and you have to adhere to it. And if you don't adhere to it, there'll be consequences. Not I'm suggesting that you don't bully. No, it is not tolerated here. It is not welcome here. And if you come here and you do it, there will be a price to pay for that action. We need to take action when they take action on our children. And we also need to think about the trauma that it causes for children who are bullied. Because I guarantee you, if we run the consultation, we would be surprised at how many children in our school would say, yes, I have been bullied. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, just to echo again what Natalia said. The trauma too is not just with children, it's with the families too, the parents. My daughter was bullied, so I get where you're coming from. And there were more resources given to the child that was doing it than to my daughter. And I get it, the kid had some issues and, this child needed help. But yeah, I mean, the trauma that to my family too, she was barely given anything. And, I don't know how to put it in words. It's a hard feeling. It's hard to deal with that. When they come home, you pick them up from school and they're bawling when you just got a message from the principal of what happened, and it keeps happening. And all they talk about is we're trying to get help for that child, the one who's doing the bullying. And no one's helping your child. She still talks about that. And that was a couple of years ago, but she still talks about it. That child was telling her he was going to kill her to her face. And that lives in her mind, in her psyche. And yeah, I mean, and I could just imagine how many other kids are dealing with that on a daily basis who are quiet. She's quiet. Like if it wasn't for the principal calling me, I probably would have never known. She wouldn't have said a word. So, I think, and it's full circle. Like I said, it's full circle. It's the child, and it drips down into the family. But there weren't any resources given. So I just want everyone to know that it's so important to focus on. Like this document is so important.
So I echo what everyone says, that this is a critical conversation, and had it been my kid's birthday today, I would have also been here because that's how important this conversation is. There are two things that stuck out for me, aside from what everyone has already mentioned. Number one, what is missing, and it's a simple little word, but it is the world of a difference, is the word experience. And the reason I say that, and I'll just give you one example, and I'm happy to point towards others at a later point. But, hold on, I had it 2 seconds ago and then. Where the heck is it? Anyways, I can't see it right now, but I'll point to it and I'll bring it to your attention. But it is not, I know we've heard the word trauma. I respect that. We've heard the word victim. I respect that. But bullying is an experience. Not every child experiences it as trauma. Some children totally numb out. It's still an experience as an impact from bullying. So it's something that would be actually capturing more of the bigger picture. And that would provide an opportunity to also, like what Jen was speaking to, is address what's going to make a difference on both sides. And there's been a considerable amount of work, it's clear here, so I don't have anything else to add with regards to bullying intervention. However, my recommendation would be that this policy be renamed to bullying intervention policy alone. There is nothing in this policy that speaks to bullying prevention. It only speaks to bullying prevention once it's already occurred, which is in fact intervention. And the reason I say that is because there really is a huge opportunity here to have a bullying prevention policy. And what's unique about a bullying prevention policy is that it's not happening right now. It is not for the children that are experiencing being bullied right now. The bullying prevention policy should be geared towards the junior, senior, grade 1s, grade 2s, get them when they're young. teach them what it looks like to be kind. A bullying prevention policy has nothing to do with bullying. It actually has to do with kindness. It has to do with acceptance. It has to do with encouragement. It teaches, like you spoke to, no, you didn't say emotional. You said self-regulation. All of that, actually, tons of studies have been done that kind of work actually affects bullying prevention, but they are two different things. So, Mr. CFO, I know at some point you're also going to talk about budget, but perhaps there could be in the budget, and maybe there isn't, I don't know anything about this, but funds allocated to incorporating bullying prevention in the earlier years for us to then be around this table, let's call it 5 years from now, and see that the impact of that work will have looked like the actual the things our children are dealing with in grade 5 and grade 6 are different because we've taught them from the beginning, we're not fixing a problem. It's actually preventative, in fact. So that's what really stuck out for me. And that would be my recommendation. I think that should be something to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment and I certainly noted it. It's an interesting perspective. And I could see just going through the policy and guidelines or protocols that it does seem to gear more about intervention when something has happened, as opposed to preventative acts that are prevented. However, there are other documents and actions that staff and principals and school boards take, other policies such as the safe and caring school climate policy, and that all speak to that kind of level of prevention where we're nurturing safe and caring, the different things that we're doing that build a positive school community, all work towards a preventative aspect.
Absolutely. And so just in case my speaking didn't communicate it, I have nothing negative to say about it. It's just, I see there being an opportunity by dividing it because they speak to different people and different ways to handle it. But anyway, other than that, I think this is a real step in the right direction. Yeah, thank you.
Rochelle?
So I just want to echo what Gabriella and Natalia said, with some ideas and suggestions, and hoping that the CFO can also tell us if there's enough budget in there. So the experience, it's like what you said, right? There's no resources available for the child that's being bullied. How about using the BCBAs to teach the teachers, to teach the staff, to be compassionate for that student that has been bullied, and teach the other child the behavior of not doing it at all. And then the other suggestion would be give the resources to the teachers to be compassionate to the child that has experienced bullying. Because sometimes I find, I'm not giving any specific examples, but sometimes the teachers also have to have some kind of resources and training to understand what the child is going through and keep reviewing what the teachers know at that time. So for example, if they've not seen the bullying, for example, Natalia said they know that the children, when they come down the stairs, there's no teachers to watch what's happening, or they go out to the park. So then the teacher says, okay, we didn't see it, so we can't do anything about it. That shouldn't be the evasive way of dealing with it. The teacher should be like taught to learn how to be compassionate. Look, I understand that this happened to you. What can I do to help you? You know, some kind of mentoring or some kind of resource to help the teachers be compassionate to the students. And the other thing I wanted to mention is there's somewhere in this policy that says that the principal has 2 school days to respond. It should be specified that if the 2 school days are days that the staff member is off, that shouldn't be included in the school days policy. So for example, it says,
Can you show me where you're speaking about?
I have to find it here somewhere. It's it's on the last page.
Through the chair, is it page 7, number 5, when dealing with bullying allegation, the principal will communicate with parent, guardian, and the employees as outlined in the procedural guidelines. Principals will contact parents and guardians regarding a bullying allegation by the end of the same day as the allegation is received, absent exceptional circumstance, except absence exceptional circumstances.
That's exceptional circumstances.
So instead of like, let's say, for example, that staff member is off the next day. So like the bullying event happened on day 1. Staff member is off on day 2. They're off on day 3. So the school days have already passed. The 2 school days have passed, which means you need to specify in this policy that you can't have too many days waiting just because that staff member is off. The principal needs to start the investigation right away without waiting. The other thing is, like Gabriella mentioned, the experience of her child experiencing that event. Check in on that child, because I'm not saying that Gabriella's child, that they might have to stay at home because they're experiencing trauma. They're afraid to go back to school. Check in on that child, see if there are social workers. I'm hoping the CFO can say, look, do we have a budget to say, can we have a social worker sent to the parent's house to check in on that child? The other thing is, when Natalia mentioned that only the other child was taken care of and they were seen as the bad child, have both parents on both sides of the event. So the child that's getting bullied and the child that was the instigator, have the parents meet together in the same room and have them do something about it. So it makes the parents feel like something's getting done. Because you've only seen that, like Gabriella said, that the other side was only talked to. But sometimes it's nice to have like the chat with the other parent, so that, for example, if you were the parent who was the parent of the child who was being bullied, you don't feel like that parent is the enemy. You feel like you can have a chat with them and say, you know, what can we do to solve this problem? Get a more, a bigger picture of why that's happening. And you can, you know, you're not like, it also helps the child maybe face their fear, understand why that's happening. So, and I think it should be like a two-way street. It should be both the parents having a meeting together with the principal and having one-on-one conversations as to why did this child get picked on? And so you would understand what's going on. And then forgot my other point, but I think those are my main things. These should be in the policy. It should be, have a meeting with both sets of parents and investigate right away as much as possible.
Yeah.
Investigate right away. Don't keep it that long. And also, like Natalia said, or someone said, Gabriella said, start off early. Start teaching the children that bullying is bad. You know, bring out those books from the library. Like, for example, there's the Bernstein Bears, where they talk about bullying. They give examples, teach them, okay, if you see this, you can't be involved in it. You can't be a member of it. So start off early.
And then this is not to, through you, Mr. Chair, this is not to negate the very real and authentic lived experiences that many of the parents spoke about this evening. And there is a long road to go because we want an appropriate response to bullying in our schools. And that looks different in every situation. Every child that we work with is unique in and of itself, and every situation is unique, and every experience is unique in and of itself. And so that is why it's so important to know the students and to work closely with the parents, like you suggest. Things like bringing the parents together for a meeting, that sounds ideal and that it could be helpful, but not necessarily all parents agree to that kind of approach. And so it's not something that can be forced. It is something that can be considered. And we do things like that already. And we are doing a lot more of it, what we're calling restorative practice, where we're bringing the students together so that the student, if the victim feels comfortable being in the presence of the other student, because again, we're talking about trauma and experience. We can't force those persons together, especially when there's great feelings of discomfort, unease, and potentially trauma. So that we have to consider that. And so while these are wonderful ideas and certainly mark them down. And these are certainly practices that we do try to employ. There's so much consideration that has to go into a decision like that, especially, most especially, how the child is feeling and how the child will manage and cope, because we don't want to cause additional trauma.
Well, just maybe in the policy, just say that the parent has the option of requesting a meeting with the other set of parents. And then the other question I had was, do we have enough money in the budget for the PCBAs to teach the teachers, pass on, okay, these are the behaviors that need to be taught to the child when that's happening? Because I know BCBAs can be expensive, board certified behavioral analysts. Can we start imparting the knowledge of these BCBAs to these teachers when that event happens? Because I don't see anything in there in this policy regarding that.
Mr. Chair, I'll just be brief because I don't want the budget discussion to go too far down too many rabbit holes. So if it's germane to this discussion here, I wouldn't mind just offering a comment. Because I think Superintendent Kakamo, I think this conversation in general is raising that there's a lot of work to be done. It's been said a number of times over, but that doesn't excuse that we don't start actually seeing advancement. And we are. And I think you're going to find that, and we all know this is a different time on the back end of the pandemic. Our students are coming to us differently. Bullying is evolving. It does hide in the shadows. There is absolutely the intervention component, but we do training on the behavioral component, on the preventative component. It's complemented by the work, and again, it's tough sledding in the area of the board action plan with respect to Indigenous education, with respect to our equity action plan and the work that's happening there. So hopefully over time, those are complementary pieces that will continue to build, for the most part, hopefully flesh out that the majority of sort of the common incidents that are happening right now, the more preventable ones, the ones that there's things that are still going to happen that are going to be beyond control. There's going to be circumstances, and then how we deal with those. I think you're seeing the pieces are in our staffing now are, as I said earlier, more in focus in the area of social services than ever. Like I've been in education for 23 years now, and it's gone from being a complementary little piece of the special services portfolio, complementing the work of MCSS, to being almost our own in-house support team. So the question from the member regarding the BCBAs, there's very intentional work for our BCBAs. They can do the work, the general work that's being suggested here, but they're also working very specifically with those who are on the spectrum and other challenges that we have. But interestingly, we put 8 BCBAs additionally in our budget last year, but we haven't been able to even fill the full complement. There just is not the professionals that are willing to come to the school board at this point for that type of work. And we're seeing that with psychologists. We're seeing it with all of our disciplines. And so that's a different conversation with SEAC and with Superintendent Meehan. But it's been a real challenge for us. And so I will say this, at a time when we are constrained, there will never be a financial restriction, because it really doesn't cost as much as we would think to do the work that's being suggested. It's more around shaping the strategy, moving things as we can, recognizing that we are a large, complex, diverse ecosystem, and we have to work towards maybe the 95% that we can reach and move, and have to deal with the things on the periphery. But it's more intentional work than has ever been before. I think the incidents of the past, they still occur, but hopefully with less frequency. And when they do, that we have a better understanding. I think the balance between what's in policy and what's in guidelines has been good feedback tonight. But just know, same with the work in equity. All right, as we build out the plan, it will be funded. And so if there's work to be done, it will be supported.
Just a quick comment to what you said, which is encouraging. You said something about there's always going to be something with regards to circumstances that we just won't be able to change. And so, to be completely fair, also, I don't really know what falls into what we're talking about today and what falls into curriculum. Like, I have no idea. So I'm just going to speak what just showed up for me, and then you guys take it to whoever are the powers that be that can make a difference. But the circumstance piece that you spoke about is critical and is brilliant, because we're all in this education boat, all different roles, but for the same purpose. And it's equipping our children with what they are going to need so that once they're out into the world, they have what they need in order to succeed. And circumstances is something that not now, not ever are we going to be able to impact, right? Because our kids are still going to have circumstances, but the opportunity in what we're talking about here is equipping them with the tools so that they are not their circumstances. So that they get that they have and that they got in the school system, much like math has changed. You know how like we learned math in one way and now our kids are doing math, like mental math, and you're like, what is this? I don't understand what this is. And it's still math. It's just a new way to teach math. So that you know what the nod, you know exactly what we're talking about. And it works. It works, but who knows how it works? I don't know. But
Lost on the news.
what I'm pointing to is there is really, again, I'm hearing so many opportunities here. There's an opportunity to equip them with the tools so that they are not defined by their circumstances. Because, our kids are gonna have to deal with things like, aside from bullying, they're gonna have to deal with their little brother or little sister getting diagnosed with cancer. They're gonna have to deal with mom and dad fighting and getting a divorce, or things that I don't even want to talk about that they're going to have to deal with. We at this table cannot address those things, but we have the opportunity to equip them with what they're going to be able to use in all of those circumstances. And that will be then our legacy. That will, the people that you used an acronym, I don't know what it stands for, BC something.
The BCBAs, so they're specific discipline and.
Fine. So you haven't been able to fill those roles because people aren't showing up to, there's an
I think to me, it's actually a supply and demand issue, just in general, between healthcare. And so I think what I would say is this, maybe Mr. Chair, just supporting is, we have a lot of wonderful legacy programs that continue to evolve. But also, and it's the same with the equity action plan, we now need to move from awareness to action. And so those conversations happen actually weekly in this room with Education Council. With the superintendents, Associate Director Delamores, Associate Director Boyce, Director Brown, the corporate team, we're all here, Superintendent Peterson. It's taking time. It requires a little bit of system patience, but there's also patience has been more than. So maybe that's the last side in terms of my contribution to this discussion, because ultimately I'm, CFO and accountant. I do have some experience, but I always defer to the subject matter experts. But I will say with this one, it's not that much money to move the chains. Now, we can't staff the system out that we can have, folks on standby all the time. However, we are building out a team, a social services support team in our special services portfolio that are there, that are stretched, yes, but are available under the most extenuating of circumstances to support most unique needs. I think, and hopefully, Michael and Ryan, you're seeing that movement, and the supports are better there than ever.
That's
It
good
may
to
still
know.
be lacking, but we'll move as we advance, right? We can only get better
Advancing's
day
good.
by day, week by week, month by month, year by year. We can
Progress.
only get better. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just to add to what CF is saying, I know that the BCBs are assigned for certain projects or whatever, but if you start off early, like Gabriella was saying, if you can get the BCBs, one BCB to assign it for the lower grade classes, the JK and SKs, get it in, prevention right off the bat, right? Starting off early with that child growing up, they know that this is a behavior that's not acceptable. BCB can find out why this behavior is happening. See if we can put that in the policy, at least for the lower grades, if there's not enough BCBAs on the board. The other thing too is the child who's the tattletale, person who says, oh, I saw this child bully this child. Make sure there's something in the policy that that child is not being targeted just because they were owning up and standing up and being a witness to it. Later on, they will get bullied, but there's nothing in the policy regarding that as well. And just a policy to say, check in on the parent who had the child that got bullied. Check in on that child, make a phone call to the parent. How is the child doing? Just that phone call might make a difference to that parent.
Okay, so thank you, Rochelle. I think
I just wanted 2 seconds through the chair.
Yeah.
I think, on behalf of the many amazing teachers that are not here. Because once upon a time in land far, far away, we were already protecting the bullies in a way of giving them the resources, because that's also protection, their children. We were protecting the victims, we call them victims many, many years ago, and also the bystanders. And as I'm sitting here, I know we have a lot of work to do, but I think we also need to celebrate that this work has been done for many, many years. I came to Canada when I was 10. I was bullied because I just couldn't speak. And I think that I always like to end on a glass is half full. We do a lot of good work, and then we build on that good work, and we continue to educate. But I just needed to say that our teachers are doing some phenomenal work. They don't have all the knowledge. I don't have all the knowledge and experience, but I like to think we're here and we need to get better. And unfortunately, sometimes children don't get the right resources, but it's also, you know, it could be situational, and I wish my daughter had, she had been in my class. I just wanted to say.
Thank you. And again, I did say when I did speak about it, the teachers, once they were aware, their eyes rolled and they did look out on resources and actions. So yes, I always say thank you.
So it's 12 after 9. We do need to keep moving. So thank you everyone for the questions. Thank you to the answers. So the next step is to complete the survey. Again, will be one survey for us as a group. As a group, we will be producing a survey. Yes.
When is the survey due?
April
Survey right now, the deadline is April 28th of 2023. However,
If you need more time,
No, I just want to propose something. Your proposal is that we all sit here and do it.
no. That's what Michael's proposing. Not me.
Okay, so my proposal, throw under the bus, why don't you? Throw him under the bus.
The ask from the consultation is we complete one as a group.
Okay, can I make a suggestion? And I'd be more than happy to help you with that.
Okay.
Or everyone can send it to me and I can, send it out to the reps, let them fill in their
You want to
information.
be the collection
I
point?
can be the collection plate and I will put one together instead of us sitting here today and doing that. I think that would be,
That fixes what.
Okay.
I am vice chair, give me a job.
Okay, everyone heard
All
that?
right,
You put
thank
that in a
you.
motion?
To be fair, like, not everyone is here in this committee.
And that's what I'm saying, and everybody's here, so send it out to all the
What we can do
representatives.
is we can either create a document or an MS form, something of whatever, and then
Fills it out. I will create a Google form. And I'll send it out to everyone and they can fill in. And they'll come back to me on a spreadsheet. Oh, pretty.
Oh, there you go.
All ready to go.
It's all ready to
You don't
go.
even have to touch it. Just makes it all by itself with magic.
That was the ask, and that's how we're gonna complete. We're not gonna just assign it. Okay.
So through the chair, one of the things we're trying to do with CPIC is, and all of our different policies, is to come up with a streamlined approach for CPIC consultation, right? So if this is how because I think that works perfectly. If the ask from whichever group is carriage over policy comes as a presentation, a question period, and then it works in that method, I think and then we can refine our approach as we go, but that's something that we're trying to figure out how it works. As we
It's
go.
easy to compile. We only have 8 reps, right now. So I'm just saying, even if we had 12 all full, it's easy to compile that information.
Yeah, we have 15 in
Forward
total.
it. And the value of that, I think, is that everyone's voice is a part of it. And not doing it here allows for proper thought
Yeah.
and real valuable.
I don't think the idea was ever to do it at the table. The idea was come to the table. If there was any points of clarification, we had Superintendent Cackrell here in the room. I know we told a lot of stories, which, you know, at the same time, that's still part of the consultation. But again, so we're gonna create a Google Doc. It's gonna go out. Again, if there's any questions or whatnot, yes, Rochelle?
Sorry, I just want to bring up that it's due April 28th, so South spreadsheet.
Superintendent Cackrell said if we do need more time, he will give us more time. And I think he even mentioned that at the CIAC presentation. So we have right now 3 presentations that are due April 28th, right? We have our community engagement or the budget, which will be here from next, and this one. So I'm gonna assume that the board There are a great bunch of understanding people up there that sit in those buildings. So if we give them, an idea of when we can produce again, I'm pretty sure the research department is pretty inundated, so.
So can the committee members just say what time they would need to respond to Jennifer and give them their answers? Like, can we
Okay.
ask all the committee members to see what that date would be?
No, it doesn't have to be all the committee members. We pick a date. Like, okay, so I can put the Google form together tonight.
So today is the 17th. In 2 weeks is,
It'll be next Friday is the 28th.
2 weeks is May 1st.
Or 2 weeks is May 1st.
so in most cases, to stay on top of it, because if we give too much time, people forget and don't do. Right, so the key is usually a week. So is a week from tonight, let's say a week and a day, so that's next Tuesday versus next Monday. That
25th.
your answers would be, you would fill out the Google form by next Tuesday, which is the 25th.
Do we have a vote on it?
Just do it. Don't need a vote. Just do it.
Is there another date that you're looking for, Rochelle, or this is the thing?
Because I got that symposium happening that first week too as well, so there's just some stuff.
The problem is when we go into
Yeah, it's not,
sorry,
go ahead, Joe.
thank you.
No.
When we go when you go past that 7 to 10 days, right, you tend to kind of lose faith, lose hope, especially tonight that we just had this opportunity with Michael. If Jen can have this up by tomorrow, or the next day, our brains are like, we were already in conversation, right? We just had Fully Alive, we just did bullying. A lot of those two kind of were intertwined.
Okay.
And we can go, okay? So we're not, I'm just gonna put as some notes in the minutes. We're all in agreement, perfect.
Sorry, what date are we going with again?
So we're gonna aim for everyone to complete the Google form by April 25th.
So May 25th.
No, April 25th.
April 25th?
Yes, we're in April, Michelle.
Yeah, no, I just thought we were going 1 week.
I'm just gonna read her.
Okay.
Joe, I was just gonna say
Oh,
one
yes,
thing,
go, sorry.
just because we got this, through our principal and so we're in between meetings as a council. So I would love a way to easily send it out to my group, because she's gonna create this for this and I might like steal it and then be able to send it out to my group, my individual council.
Like out of CPIC.
Yeah, because we're not gonna have a meeting in time for
I
that.
know in the Google Forms, there's a copy survey
Mhm.
button.
100%, yeah.
But I would love that, because I know there are things that come down and like granted the time frame is quick, but that'd be great to look forward to moving forward to have, a quick and easy way to survey your CSPC
My
members.
recommendation is speak to the principal, ask the principal, because you also have access to Microsoft, whether it's Google, we use forms.
Yeah.
And they can easily do one, you would copy it and send it out.
Okay,
And then the principal's in the conversation is that you're doing that.
He's all about
The
it, which
principals
is-
and
yeah.
CSBC chairs received the survey as well at
Yeah,
the school
I'm
level.
sure. Yeah.
So you received it too, right?
I received it. It's just, we're not gonna have a meeting to have, right? So then
So
I
you
have
wanna
to
send them a
send it
Google
out.
form.
Yeah,
I see.
that's what I'm saying. We just won't be meeting in time. That's all. Moving forward, like when things come up like this, is just to have an easy way
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, if we come up with an easy way to do a lot of things, the world would be a better place. Sorry.
Put it on your list of.
You're good, okay, so let's do receipt of the presentation. So in including the receipt of the presentation, we are gonna add that we are gonna create a Google form to capture all the CPIC members' answers and the request
Just
by,
real quick, are there specific questions you want me to ask? Is there like?
there's a survey.
Survey
There
has,
is a survey. He's gonna give it to you.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's all I need.
It's there.
we just ask that you do not share the survey link.
No.
It's just for-
Yeah.
Okay, so with receipt, Google form, April 25th, the response for CPIC members, can I get someone to move? Wow, that's fast. I saw Gus
Very open-ended.
and Natalia. Is there anyone opposed? You're not that curious, so thank you, everyone. Again, questions, always reach out. Superintendent Cackle is always available.
Yes.
Always.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice evening. And if he needs to put money somewhere, save schools. Just kidding.
Basketball courts and McGuigan, saying.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, so before we move into 7E, which is our budget, we're gonna give, we'll save a 5-minute bio break. Everyone's got a 5 minutes, so it's 9:21 on my clock at 9:26. Yes, no?
To get that Boston t-shirt.
Oh, turn the mic on.
It looks so good. It was worth it.
No, if you look at, he's gonna see the full screen there.
Okay.
Okay, and then after when you come back, I just
Okay. All right, everyone, welcome back. We are moving on to item 7E, the 2023-2024 budget framework. Our CFO, Ryan Putnam, is here again. He's going from committee to committee, preparing us for the what to come next. So, I have the presentation on the screen. Just let me know when you want.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me this evening. I've had the materials, so I won't belabor, although I don't also want to rush anything. I think there's a combination of a few things that we'll want to cover off tonight. Really, the budget framework for March is sort of the culmination of almost weekly, if not bi-weekly, presentations to the board around awareness of our current situation, some of the key metrics, having an understanding, a little bit of the history helps to understand where we are, what are our challenges, what are our opportunities, what's unknown right now, and then looking ahead, what does the next 2 or 3 years look like? What's the most immediate in terms of the work that we need to do this spring? What are we still waiting on hearing before we can put the last of the pieces together? And so this is sort of a touchstone as well. Within the presentation, we are addressing the majority of our budget challenge. It's required for a number of reasons, predominantly because of our staffing and our timelines and the need to know by the end of March, or our other drop dead date was last Friday in terms of our teacher staffing, and so having to be able to execute. And then also it helps us just then narrow down that once we know the last of the pieces, predominantly in the area of funding, then we'll have a better sense of what we really need to address rather than it being, just one large big number. I find doing things in chunks or increments makes it manageable. And just to keep things as simple for even myself and my team and for the executive team, just to try and do things in buckets and compartments so that we know that we've dealt with something and then we can move on. I think in my 20-some years in education, this is my 16th as a CFO. This is probably one of the more challenging budgets as I look ahead to the next couple of years. I've been in this situation previous, but without the same sort of restrictions, constraints, or urgency that may be facing us, whether it's moving ahead with the student achievement agenda. There were some announcements from the province yesterday and again today around investments, whether it is challenges or within our budget structure, things that we need to be able to work ourselves through, but are going to be longer conversations than immediate. But you need to start those conversations now. And I think what we're going to find is the next couple of years is probably where we're going to have the real pressure points. This year seems like a big number to deal with. But of the next 2 or 3 years worth of adjustments, it's probably be easier to affect and easier for us to control. And I think in terms of system impact as well, we feel pretty comfortable that the areas that we've been able to identify for savings will still leave us in good shape for next year, right? That we're not dipping into core service levels in any area. So that's sort of the backdrop. And then of course we do have a budget consultation that's been out and active and live. Yes, I have been on the budget tour. I really enjoy and I appreciate the time, not only that CPIC, but I've had the chance to be at CPIC a couple times as well. We've had some dialogue as well through the superintendents with CSLIT and just getting some feedback. And we have a sense from the students of where their areas of priority would be. So it's always good learning for me. I'm 2 years in now at Toronto Catholic, so I feel more comfortable not only just understanding obviously our overall numbers and framework, but understanding the dynamic and the culture. It is different coming from a peripheral GTA board, so out in Durham for 20 years. It is different. I've come to appreciate some of the challenges and the complexities that those of us on the outside through the years have always wondered why Toronto Public and Toronto Catholic have either had fiscal challenges or other pressure points or a different set of rules, and I'm starting to gain a better appreciation for that. The city is an ecosystem unto itself. And so I just leave that as the backdrop. I'll be looking for responses, obviously, to our survey from an individual perspective. I'm here more in an open dialogue with CPIC. I wouldn't think that we would need to receive anything specific, although if CPIC wishes to provide something, you can at any time. I'm also a big believer that consultation is ongoing and fluid. It's a movement, not an event. In fact, a lot of what we may receive feedback might actually then inform conversations that we have in the next 3 to 6 to 9 months as we look ahead to the following year. So we're always kind of working and looking ahead. And as well, a lot of this needs to be benchmarked to our multi-year strategic plan, which of course went through a very rigorous consultation process a year ago. And so the budget exercise isn't about us identifying new things that we want to be doing, but rather aligning back to the strategic plan and just doing, getting feedback in terms of how things are going, what adjustments might we need to make, and what financial resources might be required. So I'll move along quickly, but feel free to stop me through the chair, just because I can sometimes get a little tunnel vision on the slide that I'm on. So Joe, if you see anybody raise a hand, I'd be happy to stop. There's a slide on each of these topics, so we'll just move on to the next one. This is a sort of the summary slide that if you need to understand our current situation, right now we, this current school year, have a $25 million reserve reliance or deficit. Why is that not sustainable? Because our deficits can't carry us, or excuse me, our reserves can't carry us forever. Think of reserves as being your own savings or nest egg for a rainy day. And so that is the challenge that we start with for this coming budget year. We have a question through you, Mr. Chair. Jennifer.
Did having to use the reserve during the pandemic obviously impact, is that part of the impact on that? Like you were told, because boards were told to use their reserves during the pandemic.
It's all interrelated.
Okay.
So I'll say it this way. The pandemic, yes, boards were heavily reserve reliance. In fact, twice over, we exhausted our reserves, and then we were able to, through a combination of advocacy, get some of our reserves returned. And through opportunity of taking advantage, we were actually able to shift and use the reserves before they otherwise would have been lost to advance on some things that otherwise wouldn't have happened. What you're going to find here is that the 25 million is, think of us, we're $1 billion budget, right? Our budget is $1.025 billion, and we get $1 billion in revenue. We have a $25 million sort of just, we spend 25 million more than we get. It's a combination of some residual pandemic investments. It's also the reality that this was, we still had to make sure we were meeting students where they were at, learning recovery. There'll be some metrics in here that'll give you a sense of sort of where we left investments when maybe we could have or should have made adjustments. If it hadn't been pandemic for the last 3 years, we would have been more aggressively making adjustments in certain areas, but we haven't, and for all the right reasons. So although it feels like now the sort of the end of the end of the track is coming, the reality is that we had a mandate, I think, through the pandemic, 1, to provide as much stability as we could, 2, to maximize our resources, and 3, to live to fight another day. As we look ahead now with post-pandemic, a little bit more certainty around sort of, I think, our climate, our school climate, a better understanding of what that looks like, a better sense of direction out of yesterday and today from the province, although it's really recycling the same money. And so that with it comes with some challenges. They can, repurpose funds, but if it comes with new expectations or restrictions, then that'll mean we'll also have to make some adjustments so that we can shift those funds to be used as they now intend. I think if I'll try and work through it, and Jennifer, hold you, but if there's, I think it'll all come together a little bit. And I try to keep it as high level as I can, just to give an appreciation that we are now, unfortunately, at a point where we're going to have to start making adjustments. This year is not so much reductions, although everyone feels that, if we reduce the number of staff we have, or those are reductions. The real term right now is we're resetting the system and right sizing it to our enrollment. The second bullet point there is actually, I think, speaks to it quite directly. Over the last 5 years, we've declined as a board by 7.5%, from 92,000 to 84,000. We've only adjusted our variable staffing, so classroom teachers, a number of areas, either direct or indirectly tied to funding through enrollment. We've only adjusted by 2.5%. So that 5%, when our budget for our staffing budget is about 940 million, that 5% is around 40 million of unfunded investments. We then also have, it gets confusing because there's a number of different categories that map to special education, but you'll often hear me speak that we have a $30 million special education deficit. What that simply means is wherever we choose to spend our money and whatever we have to account on comes back with a different number, but we have 25 million more in our system for different reasons. Some of it's intentional investments. Some of it's the inability for us to make adjustments because there's restrictions, for example, moratorium on even being able to consider school closures and dealing with our school utilization and our enrollment decline, to pressures with respect to the actual cost of sick leave relative to how we're funded. There's a number of things that contribute that this sort of organizes a little bit, but at the end of the day, what it says is we're now having to make some adjustments and we're going to have to look ahead to affecting efficiencies or starting to affect reductions.
You said there's a moratorium on being able to utilize your.
We can't close schools, even if we wanted to. So for example, and it was in a previous slide deck, and I don't want to go too far off, but there are about $20 to $25 million of investments or inefficiencies that we're not able to address right now, even if we wanted to. And then beyond, so for example, our elementary enrollment right now is 80% of the number of spaces we have. So 20% of our facilities are empty. Over time, you need to right size even the number of facilities you have, whether it's for operational purposes and efficiencies, staffing, sometimes it's pedagogy. There's a certain size of school that's really more efficient to run operationally. You can have extracurricular, to the ability to request new school builds because empty spaces count against you. So it's hard for us to get approvals for new projects if we have empty space. Now in the city, it's a little different than the peripheral. Again, it's a little easier to have a conversation in Durham, space in Oshawa, so they could hold you accountable if you had empty spaces. It's only 20 minutes away. But in Toronto, it can take you 45 minutes to go 1.2 kilometers, right? So it's a different discussion, but when you just sort of think and step back from the ministry's perspective of efficient utilization of assets, how are we funded? So often my commentary isn't necessarily advocacy, but around doing something in particular, but highlighting that we don't even have the flexibility, even if we wanted to have those conversations. And moreover, as your CFO, I should have an understanding of how we're funded to how we're structured and where those are creating pressures. And so, for example, we can always use more in special education. We could always use more educational assistants, but at some point, we actually, because of these other restrictions, we're just not able to even go there even if we want to, right? We can't. So the conversation has to be around generating efficiencies, having an awareness. So if they do change the rules, what will be doing? A long-term accommodation plan will be really important around our schools. In the area of transportation, we have restrictions. Right now, we have bell times in our collective agreement of 8:30 or 9 o'clock, but a 30-minute window is not enough for us to be efficient with our tiering with our buses. You need at least an hour. So there's just things that we're going to have to start the conversation with the hopes of being able to get to efficiencies down the road. There's a lot of politics involved in both school closure conversations as well as transportation and bell time changes. But again, you have to weigh those against, well, where else might we have to start considering making adjustments or reductions? Because ultimately we have to bring our budget into line, right? The province has signaled very strongly that they feel they're putting money now into new directions, but they also expect, and the premier has been very clear, he wants waste, whatever that would mean, out of the public sector. I can tell you, we don't have a lot of waste. Everybody will have their own opinion about the relative priorities of our spend. But when we step back and kind of look in the context of $1 billion budget or education, 27 billion, there's not a lot of waste except for the inability to actually get to and unlock some of the efficiencies. So part of what I'm trying to do here this evening is just give you an awareness, maybe an appreciation for some of the challenges that we do have when we have the conversation, say we need to make sure we have money in the budget. I get that, but everything is an opportunity cost and everything is a relative priority. And what's number one priority for one area is not necessarily number one priority elsewhere, and we have a number of priorities. So I just raise it from a big picture. We are declining enrollment, and I think it's actually, we were projecting to rebound to where we are today by 2027. My sense is that we're going to be doing well to get there. So in other words, we're looking at continuing decline for the next little while. We have pressure points that are raised there. We also have, in addition to $25 million deficit this year, 10 million more of pressure through inflation. Contracts go up. Our transportation contract has goes up by CPI, for example. If CPI stays at 6% on 40 million is 2.4 million. It goes into the contract. Those are things that automatically happen. So we have about 10 million in additional pressure. So our overall challenge for next year's budget, if we really wanted to balance, truly balance, would be to deal with 35 million. We have a strategy that you'll see, which is to go after this year's 25 million through a budget plan, and then use what remaining reserves we have to defer the $10 million of adjustments, to carry it for one more year, so then we can hopefully figure out where we want to go through a more rigorous process, have some more time. Hopefully the province addresses some of the restrictions. Maybe we have an opportunity locally to start conversations that need to be had to maybe start unlocking some things internally, but those things take time. I see your hand, Rochelle. We are like a cruise liner. You can only turn us 5 degrees at a time. I'll pause, Mr. Chair, for the question.
Is the board asking the government for money back on masks and sanitizers?
For you, Mr. Chair, we've been supported. They're done providing us the support or any more costs that we have in that area, other than just if it's nominal in the area of ventilation. They had been providing our masks for us.
You didn't have to go into the reserves? It
No,
wasn't in the reserves at all?
no. And I think there's a misnomer that why wouldn't we budget, or do we budget for things that would avoid reserve use? At this point, anything that we budget for beyond what we're already carrying comes from the reserves anyways. And so it's the real challenge we're having is our reserves are being depleted, partly through intention in terms of investment, partly through the structural challenges I was talking about. And then, as you'll see later as well, just the reality of what we're having right now in terms of our reality of our sick leave and absence costs as a system. Those three factors are basically putting pressure on us, where we had sort of a 3-year plan where we kind of could work through it. And now it's being accelerated because our reserves are being used up really in all 3 of those areas. Okay, I know I apologize for speaking abstractly because a lot of it's covered through the slides. So maybe what we'll do is, if we move forward, the exercise we did over the last couple of months was simply to look where we have flexibility. It's, in my opinion, it's never good to go looking for what could come out. You're always better off having and taking the time to validate what you keep in. That will be the exercise over the next 6 months as it informs the budget for the next 2 and 3 years. Because we had only taken 2.5% of our variable staffing out, that we knew that was a spot that we could go for this year to reset the system to our funded staffing levels, to our collective agreement and legislative staffing levels. It means that we're providing this, the base level of staffing in certain areas that would address most of our pressure. But now we have to start a really intentional exercise. It's called zero-based budgeting, but effectively it's through inquiry. You look to validate your expenses. You can priority rank them. You can classify them into whether or not you can't avoid it, it's contractual or committed, or it's essential to running an operation. The best example I can give you is collective agreement doesn't tell me that how many payroll clerks I have to have, but I have to have enough to pay 10,000 people. And then you get into the rest of things that are in our budget where it's all value added, but it all then becomes a relative conversation around priority. And those are also the areas when you have to make adjustments that you have to start scaling back potentially. And so that exercise is going to be very intentional as we look ahead to years 2. So that's all that slide was saying, is those are the areas where most immediate, we were able to look for big chunks of flexibility to address the 25 million. In terms of our framework, so our plan is kind of laid out there in terms of how we were planning to use the reserve over 3 years. We'll see later on that plan's kind of out the window with the reality of sick leave. So, Mr. Chair, I think we can move on. So our budget plan, how are we going to address or eliminate this year's $25 million deficit so that it's not deficit that high next year? We have staffing adjustments of 12.5 million of the 25. For us, we're really pleased to only have to affect 12.5 million in staffing adjustments towards the 25. When again, you think that 85% of our budget is staffing. It's a very small pot for us to go looking for efficiencies. And I also say this with tremendous respect. At some point, we're a $1 billion corporation with 10,000 employees and 200 sites. We can't apologize for, nor can we go below a certain critical mass or watermark of core corporate infrastructure. Otherwise, we just can't support the system. And so we have opportunities across these different areas. The one area I think I would sort of focus on is we are pausing the financing and purchasing of what would be year 3 of our multi-year device strategy, that final bullet. Last year, we announced that we were going to roll out over 4 years and then continue to refresh on a 4-year cycle, a 1-to-1 ratio from grades 6 to 12. We were fortunate enough to be able to start that and accelerate it actually 1 year early. So we will be purchasing again this spring with this year's budget, what we had intended for next year, but we actually have bought then enough for half the system a year ahead. We're going to pause for a couple of reasons. Our financial climate has shifted a little bit since that commitment only 14 months ago. And secondly, we do need to look at sort of the scope of the rollout, perhaps the renewal cycle. Maybe it doesn't need to be 4 years, maybe it could be 5. We can look at sort of what's available to us. So we're simply taking a pause to get relief against the deficit for next year, but we are going to have inventory to continue the rollout. And it's our intention to even have enough inventory for the following September. Every September, there will be priority deployment. The other thing that we're going to be doing through Education Council is getting feedback now from our schools after year 1. There are certain communities where our assumption that they would all want 1-to-1. After the first year, the school is, may not need any more because it's a certain community where the students haven't taken advantage. Whereas there's other areas of the city where they'd love to be 1-to-1 tomorrow. And so we need to have that type of feedback and we need to be very intentional. But we're in good shape because we will have inventory on hand that will allow us to put continuous deployment to the areas that need it most while we sort of recalibrate our financial reality. To us, that's an equity investment in our opinion. It's not a technology investment. And so we want to make sure that we continue that.
I have a question about this. Just based on what you're saying, that there may be some areas that I don't really understand what you meant about the 1-to-1, some needing it or some not. So can you just say that a little differently so I can get that?
Let me say, our intention through the plan was to offer to all students grades 6 through 12 over the course of a 4-year period that if they wanted a Chromebook, they could have one.
Right.
We're hearing from some communities that all students won't want 1-to-1. They actually don't want the device. They have enough at home. And it's not that they know they can have one. The grades that we're rolling it to, I think, whether it's grade 6, grade 9, and then we're going to allow it to work its way through. But if there's certain communities where they haven't even necessarily deployed all of the technology because the students haven't come for it, where there's other communities where they would have gladly taken the second round as soon as we could have given it to them, right? And so that's part of the recalibrating will be a combination of, if we're scaling back our timeline of purchasing, where do we prioritize deployment? What communities will never really require 1-to-1? Why would we buy $6 million of technology each year when certain communities don't even want or need it?
Okay, got it. Now, does that take into consideration also, because that was part of what the rollout was. The other part was bringing to the schools, if I recall correctly, other than grades 6 to 8, for every 5 students, an additional laptop. Was that part was rolled out also, right?
Yeah, so for kindergarten, well, grade 1 to grade 5, there's
Yes.
certain
1 to 5.
ratios. And then for kindergarten, we're looking at a specific model as well, both with the teacher, the EC, and for the classroom. More because it's play-based, interactive. They're more iPad focused than Chromebook, for example. Yeah, so that whole model is under review. Associate Director Boyce sort of is stepping back, but he's also working. It's not just a corporate. So Associate Director Delamora and Associate Director Boyce are both going to reflect on that and will advance accordingly. So, but for now, I just flagged that pausing it gives us relief, although just one-time relief for next year, while we can buy a little time to then go through our zero-based exercise, hopefully get some efficiencies and be able to work it back in at a certain level of spend that makes sense for the system after the first year.
Yeah, and one thought and recommendation or idea would be that looking at that 1 to 5, maybe even just looking at turning it into a 1 to 7, given that most schools actually had, our school, for example, we're a school that fundraises heavily, has a significant number of affluent students in there, and still we had like 30 computers for 550 students. So anything that the board has brought in to that 1 to 5 was a big contribution to the school. Perhaps even if there's, instead of it being a 1 to 5 and it's like a 1 to 7, it's still a contribution, and it will perhaps also alleviate some of the demand.
There's some work to be done there. The other approach is you can move off the 1-to-1 and go concentration with a lower ratio on the sharing. So there's different permutations. I don't want to, but I'm glad you flagged it. I don't want to skip past for CPIC's awareness, the third bullet from the bottom, which is tied in some way to the device strategy. What that's basically saying is we have $1 million that we fund out of our $20 million central IT budget right now that are direct school-based costs, that as we roll out the devices, the pressure on the school budget to buy cards and things like that will be alleviated. And so we will be actually charging $1 million to the school budgets for direct school-related technology costs that we've been carrying through the central IT budget. So we're not cutting, but it is a downloading, but then it's a true savings because we can reduce the IT budget.
Understood.
But it's actually kind of flipping the cost, because as we roll out the device strategy, it should provide relief. The other thing we're going to do is, we got my team actually right now, it's, I've asked for it by the end of the month. I would like a general scan of the school level financial capacity for all of our communities. We're looking at our EPAM program that's got to come back to student achievement on May 30th. We've got updated socioeconomic factors, but also just even our general block budgets, the sufficiency, the economy. There's a bit of a disconnect in the relationship in our size of schools right now. The nature of use. There's still schools that are using 30 or 40% of their budget for printing and photocopying. You know, we got to get past that. That's not, it's partly tied to not having technology, so you have to evolve away from it, right? It takes the investment of technology to help bring that number down. So there's some work that we're looking to do right now to make sure that our schools can absorb that million, but also we can give them a little bit of sense of where their spend is, maybe some suggestions. That kind of work's happening right now.
Thank you. Both my children have assisted devices. They were given like laptops because they have reading disabilities and they're in special.
That's not
programs.
affected.
That's not affected.
No, separate funding stream.
I get that, but being a parent that, like, I have 2 laptops sitting at home doing nothing, and then they have these 2 brand new laptops that they're using in, you know, like, they could have maybe used what they already had.
Yeah.
Like-
Oh, so you've received a Chromebook in addition to the SIA equipment.
Yeah,
So those are examples where on its face, the system rollout makes sense, but when you get into the 1-year feedback and examples that you just raised,
and
that's
I,
part of
yeah.
what we need to better
And
understand.
I said, I don't need them. They're like, take them. And I'm like, I don't, like, give them to somebody else who needs them. Like, why, you know? So,
And it also depends, we're getting pretty deep here, but it depends, no, it's okay, because actually, so I'm still living in Durham, so they're on a 9 to 12 1-to-1 rollout. So I have 2 kids in secondary school. Right? We have enough technology at home. They actually chose to accept the Chromebook because of the philosophy, at least in that school, where then the teaching was all geared towards all students having the same level of technology. The teacher is teaching knowing it's the Chromebook. They know, you know, what they can and can't do. And so it's a level playing field. And so it just depends on the philosophy of community, the needs of the community, socioeconomics. So we need to evolve that. The reality is right now we're just taking a pause, but I don't know that we're going to necessarily continue and pick it right back up on a 1-to-1 grade 6 to 12 on a 4-year replacement cycle. I think it made sense to go out hard and aggressive, and now we can get the feedback and we can shift and refocus. Sorry, Joe.
No, so I was just wondering
Sorry,
the
Brian.
timeline. So right now, the grade 6s are not getting their Chromebooks this September.
No, we're purchasing this spring for the planned rollout for those expecting it in September.
So for the grade 6s, they will get their Chromebooks.
Well, we're going to have that conversation to see whether or not, again, we have to get the feedback as to whether or not, you know, are there certain communities that will prioritize over others now? Are there certain communities where we still have Chromebooks sitting in boxes, even on a 1/4 deployment, right? We're gonna have to reflect on that. But we are purchasing this spring out of this year's budget to have, if that means we're scaling back a bit and we can stretch 2 years of deployment out of this year's purchase, But Brian, more on that soon, but.
So the 6 million is for the
That
next.
would have been next spring's purchase. Yeah, so we're gonna try and stretch, and if there's inventory still sitting, not distributed, we can recover that. So we're gonna have to balance sort of everything off. But thanks for the question. Jennifer, hi.
Oh, no, I was just.
Oh, okay. I think that's what I wanted to make sure I at least covered here. I did not want to skip past anything. I know there's sensitivity to the school blocks. We do the reporting out, and more on the EPAN as well. My take on the EPAN is we built over the years, we have a program that was funded from the equity reserve, and the equity reserve was depleted a few years ago. So we built sort of a model of 1 million's in the operating budget, and then we roll over the unspent every year. So it's always about 2 million that's in the system. To me, I think part of that study of each school community right now will tell us that a lot of schools aren't necessarily using the equity funds because they maybe don't need it as much as others might. And so right now, half the system gets some form of EPAN, and maybe it may be that we need to concentrate it more intentionally on the new socioeconomic stress factors that we have post-pandemic and a better understanding of what communities really need it. The other piece is it's no good to them if it's overly restrictive, right? It's really intended to be and should be a supplement that levels the playing field for the fact that they might not be able to fundraise, or they only have $1,300 in their account, whereas others have, 78,000. And so it's meant more as a supplement rather than like a fund for a specific purpose. And so I think we need to recalibrate that so that it's more effective for our schools. Looking forward, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Second half of this slide, and I'll just spend a couple minutes on it, is we are funded for, as you know, for elementary, how our class sizes, and at secondary, we're funded on certain class sizes. We've been staffing beyond that, but we also have collective agreement formulas and other staffing requirements that we've been exceeding. And so when we look at our overall staffing, you can see the numbers there. We have 3,730 elementary staff presently right now. We'll be making adjustments of 60 by just tightening up where we've been over. And at secondary, adjustments of 35 on a base of 1,865. So we're making adjustments of 1.6%, 1.8% in those areas. Again, it's resetting us really to just how we're funded. What it works out to at elementary, I mean, there's a little mix in there. Some of it's special education teachers, some of it's general classroom. But when you consider that we have 160 elementary schools, that's not even a 0.5 impact per school. Some of your communities might find that they're down a couple staff because it's in decline. Others might still grow, but overall, we're less than a 0.5 impact on the elementary, and we're looking at about a 1 FT impact on secondary. So when you consider a school of 60 or 70 or 80 teachers, there's 1 less teacher. The impact at secondary, though, is that 1 less teacher is 6 less courses, right? Whereas in elementary, you're just organizing the kids differently, right? Whereas at secondary, when they don't have the teacher, that's 6 courses that they can't run. Inherently, they should be able to scale back based on the number of students because that's how we're now funding it. But that does mean between this year and next year that the principal's going to have to make some decisions around which courses they use to run while still protecting and ensuring pathways for all students. Okay, and we have some challenges with some of our smaller schools. It's hard to program. They do draw off some of the other schools so that we can make sure that they're well supported. There's a certain point where you have to have a minimum number of staffing in secondary. You can't run programs. So it's a bit of a dance. The rest of it, I think, is just stuff that's sort of how we handle our staffing. We always have vacancies. I mentioned it earlier. We just cannot fill. We have some areas that are maybe at 90% fill rate at any given time. And some other areas maybe as high as 95, 98%. And then the other challenge we have is those vacancies. Some of them are filled with casual or supply and some of them aren't. And so right now we're hoping to be able to pro-generate or track intentionally somewhere $2 million of savings through those vacancies. Or if I have a staff retire and I can stretch it for 2 or 3 or 4 months before I fill it, right? Those types of things are part of our goal in our budget savings. So that's sort of how we're going to deal with the 25 million. We still have 10 million in pressure beyond, plus we have sick leave pressure that's going to come up as we go forward, Mr. Chair. Oh, funding uncertainty. What does this mean? Well, up until today, we had really no line of sight into how we're going to be funded for next year. We had some general hints. So yesterday there was the announcement around the literacy and the math in terms of sort of the minister's focus in that area. again, I'll caution when you hear big numbers, like we're putting 180 million out. They provided us 300 million this year as a sector for learning recovery funding, which they're discontinuing. So if you've been seeing Toronto District, for example, has been saying, if we don't get our learning recovery money, we're going to have to make this many reductions in the area of whatever staffing. That money's come out and they're repurposing it and putting it into new directions. Some of what the exercise we'll have to do right now is understand what are we receiving. And then of the things we're doing right now, what would actually be now funded by the province? Like, in other words, can we match it to what we're doing, right? Or do we have to do something additional? And so that's the work we're gonna have to do over the next couple of weeks. But when the uncertainty really means at this point in time, until we have surety around the funding, the $25 million has been taken care of. We have 10 million in pressure that for next year that we're going to use the reserve for, but there may be pressure beyond that if we get less funding overall.
What's the difference between the learning recovery fund and the money that the government's saying that they're gonna help out with reading and math?
Good question. In quantum, it's about half. So they're taking 300 out and they're putting 180 back in. But also the difference maybe is we have more flexibility over the learning recovery money to use it wherever we want it. So for example, we didn't touch any of our special services disciplines last year. We didn't touch EAs, we didn't touch psychologists, we added BCBAs, we added social workers. That money was actually just, we'll call it almost a revenue top up to allow us to continue extra supports in the system. If they pull back that 12 million and then say, here's, I'll just make up a number, here's 7 million Toronto Catholic out of the 180, but you have to use it for this. It might not match up to the areas that we were protecting this year with sort of the general revenue. So that's the impact. And so on its face, we could receive the exact same amount of money in every given year, but if they pull back what was flexible and then make it restricted, then you're bumping up against budget pressure anyways. And so that's the funding uncertainty that we just have to work ourselves through. Transportation reform is the second to last bullet. We do know that there'll be funding change in that area as well. It's been a broken model for 25 years. It doesn't reflect general parameters, but I would say, and I sat on the provincial working group for this effort. It's kind of like special education where one size doesn't fit all, but there are boards that do their own thing, and you don't need to apologize for your own local decisions, but it doesn't mean that the ministry has to necessarily take responsibility for every board's local decision. They have to fund to a standard sort of parameter. That's what they're attempting to do with transportation. And if you choose to work within that funding, great. And if you choose to go beyond it, then there's no more apologies. They are resetting how we're funded so that it's as fair as it can be in its distribution. For us, we should be receiving, I think, a positive when it comes to that, because we're only providing really for elementary right now. We're still in deficit, right? And so if we get funded under some standard parameters, at least I'm hoping to see our current transportation deficit funded, hopefully. There's no promises from them because they're resetting it to standard parameters, standard walk distances, standard cost of a bus, standard driver wages. But for right now, like I said, we weren't even receiving enough to cover the elementary service that we were providing. So that should at least provide us some relief. So moving on, Mr. Chair, I will be going to board next Tuesday with a funding update once I've had a chance to dice. When I was driving in tonight, I got a half dozen emails with funding memos. So I'll have to, that's some light reading for tonight before tomorrow afternoon.
Fun.
Staffing. Okay, future considerations. The work we're going to have to do, I've talked about transportation. We're going to have to look at our staffing in all areas. Technology, we still have to look. We have some real pressures in our IT strategic plan. ERP on there means all of our operating systems, our financial system, our payroll system, our HR system, our facility system, our purchasing system, health and safety are all coming to end of life. Sorry to use terminology, but we're on SAP, if that's an application that you've heard. The current platform, we've been given notice is end of life at 2027. So we have a 4-year window to transition. It takes about 2 years to do HR and payroll, and it takes about 2 years to do finance and facilities and the rest. We're looking at about an $80 million price tag over 10 years for that, 30 million up front, and then an extra 5 million a year in licensing costs, not funded. So when we talk about advocacy to the province, I add, in addition to sick leave and the inability to sort of look at our school inventory, I add unfunded software. It's one thing about the student devices, it's about the infrastructure in the back end. So obviously the two Toronto boards were both on the same system, both end of life. Provinces, well, the between the two boards, we're looking at 200 million over the next 10 years. No. That's not a criticism necessarily of province, it's an awareness issue right now, and we'll work with them. We also have to remember their announcements, they're holding back funds within the money that's announced as increases for what will be eventually the collective bargaining increases. Right, so that's all kind of tied up in treasury right now. So they're in a tough spot too, in terms of giving us information. It's easy to criticize them, but at the same point, if I put myself in their position, right, so as the deputy minister, she's being asked to deliver on advancing platforms while treasury is holding funds while collective bargaining is happening. And so they're giving us the best information they can at the best time. We are looking as well at special education and all of our other plans. Okay, that's not to signal that it's a negative, it's part of the conversation of affirming. Board policies, two policies that the board have purview over is the transportation and also our admissions. And so we've had conversation, notices of motions to the board around the admissions policy. We can always look at our transportation policy, expansion of service, reduction of service, bell times, whatever would create efficiencies. I think I've talked about school closures. The last thing I just would say is from a financial model, for about 30 schools, we've got 30 schools more than we're looking at right now operationally out of our 200. Every school is about $500,000 in savings. The province takes 250,000 back because they take back the principal, secretary, the custodian. And there's about 250,000 sort of a net savings to a board.
How does that work out if you have a moratorium on closing schools?
You've made them perfectly aware.
It's like, because our school is busting at the seams and we need to build. It's like,
It's a tension, and that's not a narrative one way or the other than me just to simply point out we have a lot of schools. We have 24 schools under 200 in size, and so that's a challenge financially. It's when it comes then to the decision point of saying, well, we can't cut special education. Well, I can't close schools.
Can you functionally close the school, like just bus the kids to another school and the school's closed?
There's a 50% rule kind of thing.
Okay, there is something.
Once you get to 50.1, you needed an accommodation review and you're not allowed to form an accommodation review committee. Okay, and I don't throw it out casually or lightly, but I have gone through the experience of making adjustments over the course, decisions made 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years earlier can set us up for success, or decisions that we don't make now can make our challenges even more pronounced. Questions?
I
Comments?
appreciate that it is a lot later than what everyone was likely expecting for this meeting. No, it's fascinating and interesting. And I have a question about when you're talking about the schools, you're saying that most of those or majority of those are functioning at 50%. That's why it can't be closed. They can't be closed. Is that what you said? Is that what
You're going to move more than 50% of the population? It requires an accommodation.
got
The
it?
rest of it you can do through boundary rules.
Is there an opportunity to, instead of closing a school, to like sublease it to another education-based organization, like a Montessori, like a, I don't know, I'm sure there are other opportunities other than that, but like, would that not provide revenue?
We already do. So we have a number of holdings that we use right now that are either leased from TDSB or they lease to us, but also we have some that can be used for filming short term or for police services training. Yes, there are other schools, but that's what you do once it's no longer functioning as a Toronto Catholic instructional school.
So it can't be both.
So yeah, and so where you get the synergy on, the best example I can give is we have one little, you guys might be familiar area. We only had 2 schools there, 2 schools of 100. So we made one school of 200, but in doing so, we went from having 14 classroom teachers between 2 schools that were all split grades to 10 straight grades in a school of 200. 4 teacher savings by just simply combining $400,000 in savings. That's just an example, along with utilities. So, and then we were able to decide what we did with the asset, right? And actually it was repurposed by this now Cancer Center for the North. So that's where the province needs to help us with respect to effective utilization of our facilities, maximizing the return. I'm not campaigning for closures. I'm just simply flagging to say, when we look at our overall financial infrastructure and there's a desire for expansion, system expectation is add more. We're carrying a lot of extra baggage right now that we can't even have a conversation with. Okay. I think, Mr. Chair, I probably belabored that slide. Oh, bell times too, just because trustee LaPretti reminds me always, and I agree. Change is often palatable if you have time. First, you have an opportunity, at least awareness, opportunity for input, but at least then time to adjust, absorb, and be able to implement thoughtfully. Bell times is one that I would never suggest we rush. I've gone through that process as well. It can be done where it can be thoughtful, effective. You can actually manage the amount of change. You can set parameters. We're not going to allow more than 10% of our schools to change bell times by more than 15 minutes, whatever it would be. And you can still affect savings, but it's not just financial, because when you save on transportation, you're taking buses off the road, you're lessening your driver shortage issues. Okay, you're not affecting service levels, you're just affecting when schools start. Okay, but you're actually able to still provide transportation under the current policy, or you can create efficiencies where you can expand the policy. In our case, we probably need the savings towards our pressure to start. Okay, so I want to always just couch that actually that's why bell times are critical to optimize. Right now it's killing us. We should be able to double tier, like run that bus to an 8 o'clock and then a 9 o'clock. All of our buses should be at least double tier. But right now, we can't come close to that. I was able to run triple tiers where I came from because I had 75 minutes. So I could actually use the same bus and go ahead 3 routes. Boom, boom, boom. We can't even think about that here. We have at least $5 million tied up in our $40 million budget on just sort of bell time inefficiencies. But that's for another day. I think that's it for this slide, Mr. Chair. I think we'll just keep rolling with this because, again, I think we've talked about it. You guys have been kind to sort of let me do my Ryan thing, which is I know I start in Munchkin Land. I eventually get to the Emerald City, but boy, I know I take the long winding road sometimes. Okay. This is basically just telling you that we had a nice little budget plan that over 3 years we were going to deal with things. I will tell you though, and as I said earlier, the first 25 million is a lot easier than the next 10 and the next 5. Okay, based on our current restrictions. However, if you go to the next slide, it'll basically say that because sick leave, and I'm going to pause for a minute just to explain. Sick leave is provincially bargained. We all have what our plan is. So for me, all of us, we get 11 days sick, okay? And then we have a certain number beyond that where we get 90%. The province, when they introduced it a number of years ago, felt that there would be a savings there. They actually eliminated retirement gratuities at the same time, right? And felt that the new sick leave plan would be a better approach. They fund us right now for 2/3 of what our sort of pre-pandemic normal costs are. So we average about 12 sick days used per employee. We're funded for 8. And over the course of the last year and this year, we're actually tracking more like 60.
Oh, wow.
So we're funded for 20, we budget for 30, which normally hold us. Last year, we actually pierced 40. I'm reviewing the second quarter report tomorrow for taking the board next week. Our $25 million sort of plan deficit is holding with the exception of sick leave, which is trending probably about 13 million. So what this is saying here is that the reserves that we thought we'd have to use over the next couple of years to take our time on the next 10 and 5, the next 15 in reductions, that reserve will actually be gone at Christmas by the time I have to pay the bill for this year's sick leave year. And their last comment on that is there's a provincial task force that's been established to look at sick leave, but it's actually intended only to culminate to inform the next round of bargaining, which will happen.
You know the history of the sick leave when it was
Yep.
where the teachers could bank or the staff could bank the sick leave until
The gratuity.
years. Was there more sick leave that time than now? When after the rule was changed?
Yeah, because once you got to your max, so you could get to say your maximum if you're a teacher was 240 and I think non-teaching was 260. Once you got to your max bank, which normally would pay you out when you're retired at 50%, right? Once you got to that, then if we were still finding that it was being used at an average of about 10 or 11 days. What I'll tell you is before the gratuity was eliminated by the province, I cut a deal when we still bargained it locally that if the average sick days went down in any year, I would split the cost 50-50. I cut a check to the union. I never cut a check to the union. It went up every year since I negotiated that 14 years ago. And it's not a narrative on sick leave. There is some abuse, there is some entitlement, but for the most part, I think the last year and a half has been indicative. Yeah, we had a couple extra waves of COVID, but people are tired. there's mental health considerations and other things. So I'm not offering judgment at this point on the cost, but rather that we're not funded. But somewhere in the middle with and we can't get into attendance management aggressively right now. It's tied up with the provincial team, right? What I can tell you is our costs normally average 3 million a month. Last year, we were going 3 million, 3 million, 3 million, and then we went 4 million, 5 million, 6, 7, 8 to finish the year. So even at second quarter last year, we looked like we were fine. So as of Q2 this year, we're trending 5% heavier than last year. If it takes off like it did this spring, hopefully it won't. But I'm just flagging that if it does, the reserve will be gone by Christmas.
I was just gonna say, I know the way schools, especially admin, has been staffed. For example, when my son started 10 years ago, we had a VP in the school of just over 400. My understanding elementary that it's now over 500. I know there's a lot of admin staff who have gone on leave. I know like every other. So is there thought to how do we try to curtail the leaves by eliminating some of the stress that's on staff?
Yes. The short answer is yes, and I don't normally give a
I'm
short
looking
answer.
for an extra VP at my high school.
And actually, bless those that have heard this presentation more than once. Actually, Ida, you could probably deliver it now. You've heard it so many times. What I'll tell you on the administrator, and actually, so the pressure that we're seeing this year, last year was predominantly teaching where we went over. This year, it's also in administration, it's school secretary, it is custodial. Now, part of it is because we can't get permanent hires, and so we obviously have more casual, so we have to sort of leave that out. But the administrator absence has been sort of higher. We haven't changed our thresholds, Ryan. I think we're still at 425 as our trigger for a half and 550 for a whole. What we didn't do though was over the 3 years of the pandemic, schools that otherwise perhaps no longer qualify, we haven't pulled it. We are redistributing, and schools that might have otherwise qualified didn't receive. And so I think we're looking at a
And I
redistribution.
think we've also talking secondary, which has a little bit of,
I'm
it's a little
wondering
bit
what the
different than elementary
qualifiers are
too.
for secondary.
Typically, most of the secondary schools have two VPs, and then there's a few that are quite small that have one full-time. But if we went by the numbers, equivalent to elementary, they would actually qualify for half.
It's a different model. It's secondary. I've done some really intentional work in the VP allocations with both panels. What I would say is it's more around making sure we're equitable. I think we have the right amount of total FT or staffing. I think it's where we place it and the thresholds that we use.
Not to belabor the point, but like one school has 2 VPs for 600 and we're at 1,300 and we have 2 VPs. So
Yeah.
just looking at that, looking at guidance, looking at burnout, I'm just seeing a lot of it. Our school has really been impacted and I think it's happening all over because all these retired principals are coming back, thank God, to run the show. And it's like, what's the plan for moving forward? Because that can't continue.
So, and you know what, I don't want to go too far, but there's a number of factors too that it's not just the numbers. I would say it's socioeconomic. We look at the different factors.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I mean, for Ryan's role, he's the number, right? But in terms of where we are as a senior table that meets here on Mondays, the administrator burnout question is a huge consideration, right? So and the short answer is, it's a concern, it's a huge concern, specifically with the amount of retirees and the consistency that they can't be there all the year, although they have extended to 95 days, I believe. But looking at the factors of why principals and administrators are going on leave, and then what supports can we put in place to support them in a critical role that is becoming increasingly changed over the last 5 years of what a secondary or elementary principal is expected to do. So those are constant conversations and works with all of us. But that's the area that I've seen in the last little bit that has increased the most. It's like principals have now run out of gas and they've kept it through the pandemic, right? And this is where it's getting the most.
So those are intentional discussions. I can tell you, not just the area supers, but Associate Director Delamore is very closely involved in those discussions. Right now, that's an area of high sensitivity. I think just the general party line is then our goal, if nothing else, is to hopefully get through. So this current year, our year end is August 31. November is when we wrap up the financials. I'm hoping that the sick leave doesn't run us off, that we can't cover all of it this November, because that, at least then we're covered and we're not in true deficit. Although it's in like an annual deficit right now, you think of provincial debt, federal debt. I don't want to get to the point where we can't cover it. In 12 months' time, if there's not a change or relief, we'll likely be in the deficit. But I can tell you that the other major urban centers right now, like Toronto District, out of reserves, and they're looking at 90 million. Dufferin Peel's out of reserves, they're at 100 million. We're actually okay in some regards relative to them. We have some work to do. But I would prefer, and that's why we're kind of quiet and fly under the radar. You see other boards taking the approach through the press. The director and I've had our calls with the deputy minister. Trustee associations are briefed. I'll be presenting next week on funding issues to the provincial trustee association. So that's the quiet advocacy that we like to do, because, and they also trust us to give them the straight goods. A lot, if you tell them, if you go do the Chicken Little, then your credibility is gone. I would say right now that this slide deck's been shared with the deputy. So I think other than, what do I have left on the slide deck, Mr. Chair? Or next steps, tomorrow night's the budget town hall. If you don't want to hear me do the same thing for 30 minutes, we will then have a panel with Associate Director Delamore, Associate Director Boyce, and Executive Superintendent Fernandez handling sort of the student achievement, student success aspects. We have received a number of questions. It's the same format as last year's. It's the virtual format. The survey is open until the 28th, and we'll collate that and bring it to trustees. I think the rest of it covered, and that covers it as well. So sorry if I gave you more than you were looking for, but I will tell you this: you will always get the straight goods from me. There's no point not being honest. I think if you're going to be effective in your feedback, you need to know where we're at. But also, as much as the messaging can be to the system, there's a lot of thoughtfulness and a lot of intentionality put into the budget. There is not a lot of disconnect. I know there's often a sense of sort of and I joke because my parents were both teachers, so my mom's a special education teacher retired, and she'll still even say, "You guys sit in your comfy chairs in the ivory tower making the decisions, and you don't know." And EQO, this, we get it. I would hope that CPIC would appreciate that there's a complexity, there's a lot going on. We take it very seriously. There's things that we'd like to be able to do that we can't, things that we have to do that we'd rather not.
Is the town hall tomorrow night recorded?
Yes, it will be.
You watch okay.
Yes. Feel free to watch me back as many times as you like.
Well, even this evening's meeting is being recorded, so.
Thank you for your patience, everybody.
In the World Wide Web. Okay, so I'm gonna assume there's no questions and we can motion to receive the report. Jen?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys? Anyone opposed? No? Thank you, carries.
Fine, you give me a free pass on IL tonight.
Just tonight. It's only so many times I can bring it up, right?
Thanks.
It's on the agenda, we can move to the next meeting.
That's what I'm
Meeting.
How about the rest of it?
Yeah,
Let's just
the
pick it
rest
up
of the
next month.
We do need to get. They're really short. Then after that are the reports, so if.
I can do no report.
I could do no
okay, and the
report.
Trustees, okay, and
As long as you guys
LABC,
are okay. I think
yeah,
you're-
LABC rep what left already, so if we can get through 12A and 12B, which are fairly
Okay.
simple.
We're
Because,
only allowed to talk for 2 seconds.
okay, quick, so 12, so there's no delegations, no unfinished, no motions, there's no communication. So 12A is a Catholic parent or CPIC elections. Okay, this is the part of the year where we start to remind people that they're up, their jobs is, their volunteer position is available. So next year is odd wards and secondary, and we have a couple of our vacancies will fall into by-elections. So you have the dates in front of you. And the criteria, this is going to start, and we'll start to send out this information to our CSPCs. Along with this will become an agenda item at their AGM. We also will reach out to communications to create a poster, so we can use a poster to advise our CSPCs and the parent communities. The poster will go all through school principals, through school messenger, because again, you don't need to be part of the CPIC to be part of CPIC, so we're going to.
Can we really make sure that goes out to like those two parents? It's gotta go to.
Yeah, well, again, last year, both all three of us did that, and Superintendent and Ryan pushed very much at any of the technical meetings on together ourselves. Ida, did you question or just stretch?
I was just stretching. Sorry.
So the only thing to look, so here are the dates, if everyone sees them. The same time, so our elections will be, the cutoff will be by the 20th of October, with elections happening on the 26th and the 31st. And again, even for our community representative, the cutoff will be on the 20th, the same as the election cutoff. The only one thing is within our bylaws, we ask for a 10-day grace period between the last day to submit your application and the first day of elections, which we don't have here just because of the time. So as a committee, we just have to, I need someone to motion to waive that bylaw. Okay, so Jen. And a seconder? Daniel? Is anyone opposed to waiving the day grace period bylaw? No. Okay, and I guess in terms of election dates and whatnot, any questions? The date,
October
You want me to see
26th and
that?
October 30th.
it's in your book.
It's right here.
Oh, okay, I can see that.
Really good. Huh? Yes, so next year is odd, so it's 1, 3, 5, 5 east, 5 west, 7, 9, 11 south, 11 north, east, west, central, secondary, and then it is the Ward 4, Ward 8 west, and Ward 12, which would be 1-year terms. You're not there yet. Are there any questions with regards
No,
to?
there is a request. This happened, I think, I don't know if it happened this year, but it happened when I was acclaimed 2 years ago. We didn't get notice. Like I was online waiting to go on virtually.
That happened last year too.
And did it? Okay. And I'm sending out emails, what's going on? Why aren't we online? And then I found out like an hour after it had passed that I was acclaimed.
Okay.
So and
Same thing happened this year
just
to me.
for
So
people's time and. you
Tonight is
know.
more just to get the dates.
No, I know, I'm just letting Ryan know, so you keep it in mind.
Yeah, I think that's also my colleague issue, so because the SOs do their own areas and they do it once a year, so we continue to train them and stuff, but.
And we will bring, we can bring logistics back to the May meeting and just to touch on that.
Sure.
Okay, so we've the bylaw, okay, so are we to receive the dates, the election dates? Can I get someone? Gabriella and Jen, anyone opposed? Thank you. 12B is a reconsideration of motion. USC conference subsidy, that's on the sheet as well. Okay, so we passed the motion last meeting. Here, I'll give it to Gus.
So last meeting, we passed the motion to subsidize 20 parents at $200. We have 25 parents who registered from Toronto to go. And this motion will actually match what OAPSI's bursary is at $250. So we're going to be asking for $50 more a parent to subsidize them to go to the conference. So we do have 20 plus the 5 CPIC members who's registered to go. So the motion is that CPIC has supported TCDSB parents attending previous OAPSI conferences. The cost of attending the 2023 OAPSI conference outside of the GTA may be a barrier for TCDSB parents attending, whereas OAPSI is offering a bursary of up to $250 to support parents from all boards to attend the conference. CPIC would like to offer the same amount to TCDSB parents. Be it resolved that the committee approved to subsidize up to $250 for 20 TCDSB parents, maximum $5,000 to help cover the costs incurred in attending the 2023 OAPSI conference. The executive officers subcommittee will determine the requirements to receive the subsidy. So we're just asking for, like, again, just the top up, like OAPSI is doing $250 across the province. We just want to match them at $250 for Toronto, the ones who registered from Toronto to go to the conference.
Okay, so Gus is motioning that. Can I get a seconder? I'm gonna put this up. Are there any questions?
You're just giving $50 more to the people that you already.
Yeah, we're basically matching the OAPC several subsidies so that when we get to giving bursaries to these parents, there's not gonna be
Why did he get 250, not getting 200? Yeah, exactly.
the other
Well, WAPS is matching, WAPS is giving.
OAPCs, they're subsidies for the entire province.
Just, yeah.
So we, as the Toronto CPIC, have taken on our board.
Our
I can't
boards.
speak to other PICs and other boards.
They have, I know they have in the past, but other picks have given it.
But I just can't tell you what they have in every PIC has their own, I can tell you no PIC has a balance sheet like ours. So they're, you know.
For the rich.
Yeah. Don't tell them.
No, I don't say anything to anybody.
Okay, because,
Right.
You have the CFO sitting right here. Look, his eyes, his ears just went.
He's texting something.
so I've Gus, Lisa, anyone opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so nothing for 13, 14, 15, 14 or 15, 13 or 14. We will be deferring 15, 16, and 17. Nothing for 18, nothing for 19. I call for adjournment.
Yep.
And Brian, second. Sorry. John.
And do you feel bad? Because you waited all night and
No,
then
no,
we're
I
like,
didn't.
sorry,
I
Ryan. we
really
don't wanna
didn't.
hear
I'll
from you."
do 2 updates next time.
Does anyone oppose the adjournment?
I'll do the April and May update.
Thank you, everyone. Meeting over. Listen, there's.
Consultations were way
all the
more
time.
Right.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm gonna turn it off right now.
Enjoy the